Hi everyone, welcome to PW. I'm Vikas Alawat and here I am to help you out with art and culture. Art and culture is the most important part of mains examination. When I used to prepare for mains, I often had very less time to prepare for this topic. Reason being, it is very vast and in general, it's difficult to understand which topics are more important than others. This is a must watch video. Why? Because you will get a very wide coverage. Along with coverage, I'm also going to help you out how to ensure a good structure for answer writing. Because look, if we get two questions in the mains examination, then easily you can score around 50 to 60% marks if you have good quality content. And that is exactly what I've tried to give you in this specific video. So please watch the whole video. The video is going to be roughly around 4 hours. In 4 hours, you will get everything. You will get art and architecture, which includes the categories like paintings, which includes dance, which includes music, which includes even the temple architecture, Islamic architecture, each and every part. In fact, even modern architecture has been covered in this video. So if you just put a little bit of effort along with the approach that I'm going to tell you, then you can get very good marks. In fact, even if you're preparing for the next year, okay, then also you can watch this video because at least a framework is going to come to you, and on that you can build up and you can get very good marks in whichever major you're writing this year or even the next year. So please watch it till the end and make sure that you make your own notes. Okay, this PDF will be shared with you, which will be free of cost. Nothing is going to be charged for that. But side by side, I will strongly advise that please make your own notes, because when you make your own notes, recollection becomes easy. It's easy to become or easy to write answers because of that. Now those of you who are preparing for mains for this year, I have very important announcement for all of you. This important announcement concerns with how to revise in the limited time that you have. So at PW, we are coming up with the final revision series. This final revision series is going to be very, very important. Certain themes are selected by the experts for the mains examination. And on these themes, the focus is going to be on revision as well as practice, right? Because look, if you want to score very high marks in mains, you have to focus on those areas from where GS1, GS2 as well as GS3 maximum number of questions are going to come. And this specific program is for that purpose, right? So lots of faculties from the UPSC division are going to help you out in this specific series. This series can become like the last part, okay? The last part of the jigsaw puzzle, which can unlock your potential, which can ensure that you can get the maximum marks in the mains. This is exactly what this is about, right? And here, one more important thing, this is a completely free batch that I have already told you. If you want to become a part of this, okay, then you can become a part of this by downloading the PW app. To download the PW app, you can just go to the description of this video. There you will find the link. Just register yourself and then you can become a part of this course. Plus, all the PDFs, all the important articles, all the important value addition content which is linked with this specific course is going to be free of cost. You will not be charged anything for it. The only thing is you do your best, we'll do our best, right? And when this kind of effort is going to combine, naturally we will become toppers, because this is from one topper to the another. And that's what you can learn, that's what you can see with this from the side of the PW. So please make sure that you do your level best. And if you do this in the correct manner, naturally we are going to produce very good result. PW, if those of you who do not know anything about PW is an edtech company. This company has been democratizing knowledge in the field of all the specific sectors, not only UPSC, in every sector. So you can use the content, okay, and that the other courses also, if you like this content, you can become part of the other courses, which are going to be there at a very reasonable price. Plus, many of the students who have become part of the PW network, they have been able to realize their dreams. So you can also become one of them. आप भी अपनी जो आप चाहते हैं, जिस तरीके का आपने अपने लिए एम्बिशन सेट किया है, उसको आप अचीव कर सकते हो. And if you do it in the right manner, right, you can get success at an early and in a very easy manner. Eventually, right, that's what everybody is looking for. So make sure you use the resources which are available here. Make sure if you need any specific course, you become a part of it, because very high quality teachers are going to help you out in every sector. Okay, so all the very best, and watch this video till the end to get the maximum with respect to art and culture. And in this video, I'm going to help you out with art and culture. Art and culture is such an important part of civil services exam. both for the prelims as well as the mains. If we see in prelims, often we get 6 to 7 questions from this area. In mains also, we get around 2 questions, which can be roughly around 20 to 25 marks depending upon the year. Now, very importantly, in this video, we're going to be very holistic as much as possible. We'll try to touch as many different areas of art and culture as possible. And let us start with the most basic topic, that is Paleolithic and Mesolithic paintings. Okay, so let us start. So, please see the prehistoric paintings, right? This is a very important topic. In 2015, UPSC asked a question from here. They asked about the basic features of Paleolithic painting and then eventually asked us, can they be compared to modern painting? So sometimes questions will be little static, a little bit dynamic. Anyway, let us try to first understand the complete information about this topic. So when we say prehistoric paintings, in India we have 150 plus places from where we find the paintings. Among them, the most famous is Bhimbetka, all of you know about it, and Lakhudiyar is also one of the important one. When we say prehistoric paintings, okay, they can be divided into 3 major parts: Upper Paleolithic, Mesolithic and Chalcolithic. Upper Paleolithic, this is the period from where we see the beginning of the paintings, right? Upper Paleolithic roughly means this is the time period starting from 40,000 BC and it ends around 10,000 BC. That's the time period of Upper Paleolithic. When we say Mesolithic, broadly we mean 10,000 BC to 8,000 BC. That's the time period which we have for the Mesolithic, alright, and for Neolithic further from 8,000 to 1,000 BC. Now, when we specifically talk about paintings, we have to understand few things. What kind of resources were used by them? So when we see the resources, different types of pigments were used, which includes red ochre, white lime, etc., binders like fat, gum, tools like twigs, feathers, fingers, different kinds of tools were used by them. When we see the number of colors at Bhimbetka, okay, so as per the assessment, around 16 colors have been used at Bhimbetka, which means that they took this very seriously. For them, it was not just painting. For them, it was probably a very important part of life, a very creative urge, which ensured that they would put a lot of effort in creating them. When we see the themes, large number of themes are there, like hunting themes are there, social life themes like dances, rituals, multiple animals, they are presented like bulls, deers, etc. And symbols like dots, lines, handprints, all those things we find here. Now, most importantly, when we talk about paintings, there are certain things which can be asked in the examination, right? Like, what is the significance of these paintings? So these paintings probably are the earliest way of communicating with each other, right? They could also depict emotions, the way emotions were developing in human beings. They show the observation of the surroundings, spiritual thought, and in a way, human creativity. So ह्यूमन क्रिएटिविटी इज समथिंग विच इज शोन इन दीज पेंटिंग्स, है ना, तो बहुत अच्छे से उसको दिखाया हुआ है, तो हमें उस चीज़ को थोड़ा सा समझना जरूरी है. नाउ द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट पार्ट ऑफ द पेंटिंग इज the Mesolithic era. In Mesolithic era, we find maximum number of paintings. And as I've told you, there are more than 150 places from where we have found painting. Let us try to understand. Number one, what kind of themes are there which are represented in this? So one which is directly linked with the subsistence nature of that period is hunting and food gathering. So hunting means group hunts with bows as well as traps, that shows the planning. They were trying to be ready for how to hunt. During this phase, we find use of microlith. These were the new kinds of tools which were utilized as projectiles that can be linked to hunting. Food gathering. Food gathering means broadly whatever the nature offered, like the fruits, honey collection, which shows the diversity in the dietary habits also. So that's exactly what we see here, right? Social life is depicted like dances, family scenes, okay? Large number of scenes. Like in fact, if you see the paintings specifically, you will understand even better. Okay, thus they play scenes like which depict cohesion. Gender roles. Like what do we see at the time of hunting? Okay, men are given the lead, but when it comes to gathering, women are given the lead in that regard. So there is a certain level of division of labor, and that division of labor can be seen here. Identity, okay, it can also be seen, right? Those who are influential people in the society, they are given a headgear, And those like men are mostly shown in the matchstick style. Nothing much, no focus is there. But when it comes to women, they have been given a bit fuller forms. So it means that broadly there was a certain level of division with respect to painting. So they knew what kind of requirements were there with respect to the painting styles. If you see broadly, the focus on detail, dynamic animals are there, symbolic motifs are there like tridents, etc. Even they have painted many animals which are not real, like the Bhimbedka boar is there, right, which is a mixture of multiple animals. Those kinds of things we see here. So this is the first topic which we were required to discuss. If UPSC asks you what are the specific features of the Mesolithic paintings, you can mention this, okay. You can even draw a map, show the places from where we find it. Two places we have specifically mentioned in this one. One is Bhimbetka, the second is Lakhudiyar. So you can just mention them, all right. Let us move forward. The second topic, it could be terracotta art. Right. So terracotta art, these kinds of questions have come in prelims multiple times. Like there's a very famous place by the name of Chandraketugarh in the Bengal region, which has been asked twice to thrice by UPSC. So similarly, in mains also, they may ask you about terracotta art. So what does this terracotta art reflect? What is related to it? It is related to daily life, beliefs, and even popular culture in ancient India. So what kind of daily life, like toys, cards? So we have found these in Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, which shows playfulness, which shows transport, material culture, and number of things can be linked to terracotta art. Plus, if we see in the early societies, clay was one of the main chief building material for the art. So here we find different kinds of female figurines, okay, bejeweled, holding infants or grain, symbolize fashion, fertility, and even the agrarian life. In the early societies, okay, societies which were based upon Neolithic, based upon agriculture, the Neolithic period specifically, what do we find? We find that the human society started giving more preference to the fertility cult. And that is something which we find even with respect to the religious life. Like if we find Mother Goddess in the all majority of the Chalcolithic cultures, that shows, okay, the direction in which the society was heading, the kind of prominence the fertility cult came into. And this can be in the long run linked to Durga or Lakshmi. But yes, it's something which is not that much straightly connected. It's just an assumption, because whenever we go for interpretation of the archaeological sources, we cannot say anything for certain. But in general, you can write it in the general studies, because in general studies, it's all about connection. It's not about being accurate. That's the requirement of the history option in general. Animal symbols, we have found bulls, elephants, serpents, etc. All those shows, okay, all those shows the culture of those times. So terracotta offers a people-centric view of ancient India, blending everyday life with folk spirituality. Yes, you need to understand this. Art can be of two types. There can be popular art, which is made by the people. There can be court art, which is given patronage by the kings, queens, right? So when we see terracotta, it's a kind of art form which is linked to humans, which is linked to the basic humans, right, living in the society, trying to show their creativity. That's why they are so important. And one place which is very famous for this is Chandraketugarh. You can mention this, okay, from where we find large number of such will. In fact, terracotta art can be seen even from Daimabad. If we go towards Maharashtra, okay, so there also we find the terracotta models. Terracotta is also linked to agriculture. Like if we go to Banavali, you'll find a terracotta model of a plough. So those kinds of agricultural linkages can be seen from multiple places. Like at Banavali, we find terracotta plough. You can always give these examples, okay? What we are doing, we are trying to be very brief. If you have more points, please always add. Feel free, okay? Don't think like you cannot add. You can always add. Since you have done preparation, you're doing your level best from time to time, right? You can always add points from whenever you feel like you have extra points, please add it. Let us go to the third topic, okay? What is the significance of seals of Indus Valley civilization? So if we see, seals are one of the most important part of this Indus Valley civilization. Large number of seals have been found. Majority of these seals are linked to the mature phase of Harappan civilization. When we see the mature phase of Harappan civilization, we found cities like Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Lothal, etc., which shows skilled craft as well as symbolic depth. They are made of largely of steatites. So steatites is the major stone which has been utilized for their making. But along with this, we have seen use of terracotta, copper. Some of them are also made of silver. So very few of them. The general shape is that of a square or rectangular, and they are something which are carved in reverse. If we see these seals, okay, these seals help us in understanding the social and the economic life of the Harappans. Social life, because we are able to understand the script, we are able to understand about literacy. That is something which can be found here, okay, and we find large number of motifs like animals, sacred trees, mythical beings, which may show different clans, different beliefs. All those information can be seen there. These seals, if you see, some of the seals are also linked to the outside trade and commerce. Like when we find cylindrical seals, okay, when you find cylindrical seals, they are linked to Mesopotamia. Since they are linked to Mesopotamia, it means the trade was very prominent part of this civilization. Plus, if you see what could have been the most prominent use. So we often say the most important use probably was economic in nature. They were used for the purpose of authentication. है ना, तो authentication के लिए use किया जाता था. They were used for stamping goods, keeping an identity, record keeping, and most probably as amulets also. ताजीब होता है ना, ताबीज होता है, उस तरीके से आपका amulets जो है वो भी शायद use किया जाता था. So if you see overall seals, they blend art, utility as well as spirituality. Everything was blended. The socio-economic life of the Harappan civilization was very closely linked with these seals and sealings, and that shows that in a civilization, the importance of culture continues. So here we see continuation of the certain items which are linked to the Harappan culture itself. So this is about the early part of the art and architecture. Now we have those areas from where UPSC can ask multiple questions, and we would like to understand them. Okay. So one of the topic which I feel can come in the exam is Ashokan Art and Architecture. Sorry. So and that too, what are the instruments of dharma, how it can be an instrument of dharma and governance. Let us try to understand it. So if we see the Ashokan art and architecture, we can begin with his time period, which is around 268 to 232 BC. He pioneered the art and architecture. He was trying to promote the moral values and political unity after embracing Buddhism. So when we see his Dhamma was a set of do's and don'ts which he ensured were very important for the survival of his empire, which were very important for cohesion in the society, which were very important for ensuring respect, trust in the society. So that's why Dhamma was a multi-level tool. It was not just a religious tool, right? It was not just any new religion, because in this he had ensured those kinds of codes and conduct which can keep a society together. At the same time, it can ensure survival of a political empire. So those kinds of ideas can be linked to Ashoka and his art and architecture also. So see, one of the most important thing which is linked to his architecture is his pillars. If we see his pillars, right, these pillars were made at a specific place known as Chunar. And if we have find around 30 monolithic pillars. So these 30 monolithic pillars, they are across the empire. The most important thing is, since they were made only at Chunar, it means certain level of centralization was there. Certain level of centralization was there. And that is something which is unique. That shows that the Mauryan Empire was having a level of unity. Next, we find multiple types of capitals. Lion capital is something which is very important. If we see at Sarnath, we find these 4 lions, okay, sitting back to each other. And this symbolizes power, dharma, and universal outreach. And today, it is India's national emblem. So, try to understand when we talk about Ashoka is a very interesting personality, right? In the initial phase, he was someone who killed probably 99 of his brothers for coming to power. Then the Kalinga War. After Kalinga War, he changed eventually. He embraced Buddhism also. It did not happen overnight. It happened in a slow manner. But thereafter, the things changed for the better. Next is stupas. Okay. So if we see stupas are the mounds which probably started from the post-Vedic period, even before the history of the Buddhism. And more importantly, when we talk about stupas, as per tradition, he built around 84,000 stupas, and the most prominent among them is the stupa at Sanchi, right? And they have preserved the relics of Buddha, and they have promoted pilgrimage over a period of time. And if we see stoop has multiple elements. Okay, stoop has multiple elements like harmika, chhatra, all of them, they have a specific significance. Then we have his rock edicts also. Okay, rock edicts are of multiple types. We have major rock edict, we have minor rock edict, we have major pillar edicts also. Okay, we have minor pillar edict also. And finally, we also have cave inscriptions. So if we just combine all of them, okay, if we just combine all of them, you'll find around 33 edicts across South Asia. All of you know about it. So we find his edicts from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, from India, from Nepal, and if we go towards south, broadly at the boundary of the Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. And if we go towards the Kandhar, there we find the bilingual edicts, which reflects cross-cultural diplomacy. Okay, that's broadly that is there. So if you see in India, we find the Brahmi script, and side by side we also find the Prakrit languages. But if we go towards the west, we find Kharosthi also. If we go further, we see the Greek as well as the Aramaic also. So overall, there are 4 scripts that we find, and 3 languages are there, because Greek and Aramaic are languages in themselves, and then we see the Prakrit also used. So 3 languages, 4 script have been utilized in writing all these rock edicts, and this is something which can be linked with governance. Okay, so art on one side, on the other hand, it also can be linked to the governance in general. Then cave architecture, right? Cave architecture, one of the earliest donation if you find, which is recorded, like the Barabar caves, Ajivikas. So he gave donation to Ajivikas along with his grandson Dashrath. So they gave it to them. Ajivikas is a sect which believes in the concept of fatality, which means that everything is fixed. Kismat ke khel hai sab kuch, right? India's earliest rock-cut caves with polished interiors and proto-Cheta design can be found here. So overall, if we see his legacy, he fused ethics with governance, making art a public tool for unity as well as dharma. So you can remember all these pointers. Okay, make a good answer on the basis of this. So please always do go for brainstorming. These are the pointers which you can use for the sake of brainstorming. Let us move further. Okay. Now, one more question which came in 2017. This question was, to what extent, okay, we can see that the India's numismatic art declined after the Guptas. So we have to understand what kind of beauty was there in the coins of the Guptas. That's the first topic that we have here now. So now let's see excellence in the Gupta numismatic art. What's the meaning of this? Okay, what's the meaning of this? So if we see the coins of Guptas, they are literally a piece of art. If we see the early punch-marked coins, they do not look beautiful. As tradition was changed by the Indo-Greeks with the coming of the portrait, some level of beauty came, but the beauty reached its peak during the time of the Guptas. And how? That's something which we need to understand. So if we see Gupta era, it is considered as the age of the golden age of coinage, artistry, symbolism, and even metallurgy. Okay, like we have the Mehrauli pillar. So what are the features? We find these gold dinaras, which are linked to the Roman dinar. With intricate design and clarity, kings are shown in dynamic poses. Like we find multiple kinds of poses, right? Samudragupta with Veena, lion heart. We have these tiger slayer coins. Okay, we have these beautiful gold coins. Such kind of artistry cannot be seen later on. One reason could be the decline of trade and commerce, but side by side there could be other factors also. Probably the monarchs of the Guptas put a lot of emphasis on their coins, while on the other hand the others may not have done it. Plus later on we may have seen the beginning of the use of the kaudis, beginning of the use of the hundis, all those other forms of financial instruments which could have been utilized, which would have reduced the overall use of the coinage during the later period. In fact, if we go for Marxist historiography, R. Sharma uses the word which is known as monetary anemia. there is a decline in the use of the coinage. To what extent that is true, it remains debatable. But one thing is very clear, okay, that these coins, they are unmatched, the technical standards are better, and later on, the decline of the political utility and reduced craftsmanship, more focus was on utility rather than on the overall coinage. Okay, so these are some of the pointers which you can use for writing your answer. Again, these are the themes, these are the multiple themes. So some of them from where UPSC has asked questions, some of them from where UPSC can ask questions in the future. So all of you who are watching this video, please utilize these resources for your betterment. And for mains, always make this a standard that you remember 4 to 5 points. Do not try to remember 15 points, 20 points for art and architecture. It's not required. If you can remember 5, 6 or even 7 points, that's more than enough, because this is where you have to remember exactly. Here, remembering the technical details is the biggest challenge. Here, it's not about remembering too many. Even if you remember 5 to 6 technical details of that piece of art and architecture, naturally you will score more marks than the others. Okay, so let us keep on understanding this. Next, one of the most repeated topic, Gandhara versus Mathura. Okay, so these three schools of sculpture, we see their development during the post-Mauryan period. In fact, if we see from the perspective of art and architecture, post-Mauryan period is one of the most vibrant. Different schools emerged. If you see Gandhara, so this school emerged around 1st century BC. The reason is very clear. Northwest India, places like Takshila, Peshawar, Bamiyan, all of these are the places where we see the Gandhara school of art. What kind of stone was used? So grey schist was used here. If we see the influence, we see the influence of Greco-Romans as well as Central Asia. Central Asian elements includes like thick robes with deep folds, which is the Kushan style, wavy hair, sharp features, all those can be seen from there. If we see the Greco-Bactrian elements, okay, so we find togas, flowing robes, realistic idealized faces, okay. Decorative motifs are there like use of acanthus leaves, friezes, which are also supported by Indo-Greek rulers like Menendra. So when technical level of questions are asked, you have to be very specific. You can't just remember random things. You have to be very specific. So in such question, I would always advise, please revise at least 2 to 3 times. Features include like wavy hair, okay, sharp features, realistic anatomy, naturalistic classical depth, and the famous standing Buddha that we have at Takht-e-Bahi is a very good example of the Greco-Bactrian elements. Bactrian means the northern part of Afghanistan. That is what is the area of Bactrian. Okay, please remember that. One of the most important topic with respect to this is Mathura School of Art. If we see Mathura School of Art, if we compare it with the Gandhara, the first point which you have to remember is that it is a bit older school. It started around 2nd century BC, okay? While if we talk about the Gandhara, it starts at 1st century BC. So it is older, that's one thing you have to remember. Second, if you see area-wise, which is very clear, it is in the area of UP, the western UP. The material used is red sandstone, okay? Large number of tradition can be found, indigenous, yaksha, cults, etc. All this can be found. If we see the features, we find more features which are more Indianized. We find the round faces, okay? We find the yogic pose, transparent robes, spiritual calm. So those kinds of themes can be found here. Symbolic idealized style there, and famous is the seated Buddha that we have, the Katra Mound, right? But these are some of the examples which you can remember with respect to the Mathura school. Now, let us move forward. Okay, let us move forward. UPSC has not been asking any questions from Amravati, so that's why we have left it out. But our focus is always going to be on those areas from where maximum questions are coming. But still, for Amravati, you can remember 4 or 5 points. Like number 1, we see use of the white marble. Number 2, we see the focus on stories of Buddha rather than individual sculptures. Focus is always on the story. That's number 2. Number 3, Jataka stories are mostly depicted in the sculpture sculptural motifs of the region of Amravati. That's what you can remember. Time period is again around 1st century BC. The patronage was given by the Satavahanas and it continued later on. Famous areas include Amravati, Nagarjunikonda. These were the important area with respect to Amravati. So just for the sake of information, I'm repeating 4-5 points. But what I feel that when you write mains, you have to be very specific. When you are specific, you get more marks, and that has been the way to clear this examination. Let us now see Ajanta paintings. So if we see Ajanta paintings, okay, there are multiple things which we can learn from here about the people of those times, about the way these people were sharing their relationship with Buddhism, what kind of ideas, thoughts were developing. So number one, if we see the Buddhist Jataka tales shows Bodhisattva compassion, right? Ajanta has two phases, okay. The first phase is that of Hinayana, the second phase is that of Mahayana. Okay, these are the two phases that we have, and in the second phase, the focus is on Bodhisattva. It is on Bodhisattva. Then, if we talk about social life, okay, we find scenes of dancers, traders, okay. Slowly, we see the use of the royals, women shown as queens and celestial beings. All those part of social life are there. Costume, diverse clothing, which indicates social classes as well as fashion. So, multiple kinds of things can be seen here. Patronage. Descriptions reveal support from merchants, monks, and lay people. Lay people means common people. That can also be seen. Art style, rhythmic lines, okay, expressive faces, tempera on dry plaster with rich details, right? All those points can be seen. So Ajanta murals is nothing but it's about merger of spirituality with daily life and emotions. You can remember some extra information also, like overall if you see the 29 caves, they are linked with Satavahanas, okay, as well as they're linked with the Vakatakas. We have famous paintings like painting of Padmapani Bodhisattva. So those kinds of paintings are there, which are very unique, very prominent with respect to Buddhism. So you can remember 4-5 points. It's always about remembering some detail so that you can recall it and then finally you can convert it into an answer. That's very important. Such kind of details are often used for the introduction. So when you write introduction, you can just write very quickly that Ajanta caves, they were made in two specific time periods. Overall, there are 29 caves and they are linked with the patronage of Satavahanas and Vakatakas. That becomes a good introduction. You give a broad time period, you link the dynasties linked to them, and overall, how many number of caves are there. Fresco paintings they use, okay, so we find fresco paintings are here. Then we have the contributions of the Chola period, right? This is the next topic. What is the contribution of Chola period to Indian bronze sculptures? So if you see Indian bronze sculpture, the first thing which is very clear that they've used the lost wax method. Lost wax method is not used for the first time. The same was used even by the Harappans. But here we see the better utilization, the kind of outcome which is there, it is very beautiful. Second, we find aesthetics, graceful Tribhanga posture is there, dynamic expressive sculptures like Nataraj, right? Like if we see Shiva is shown as a Nataraj, and this is one of the most beautiful sculpture that we have in the world, made of the copper. Here he embodies cosmic creation, destruction, and this many of the icons they emphasize bhakti devotion also. And these bronze were living deities used in temple festivals and processions. So from time to time they were taken to temples, right? And eventually the different kinds of rituals were associated with them. So it's not like that these sculptures were static in nature. They kept on becoming part of the different rituals from time to time. Next, please see iconography. Okay, so strict adherence to agamas and Shilp Shastra for form as well as symbolism, right? Agamas, these are the important texts which are linked to Shaivism. So these are some of the features which can be linked with the Chola art. Let us now move forward. The next topic that we have, it is with respect to Mughal school of painting. Okay, so when we see Mughal school of painting, we do not have a Sultanate school of painting because the Sultanate during that time, the tradition was not there at all. They were Sunni Muslims, and as per them, it was prohibited to have paintings of living people. But by this time, the rules got relaxed. If we see the initial ruler who was linked to them, it was Humayun. Humayun went to Persia, and from there he came out with two famous painters. Okay, he came out with Abdul Samad and Mir Sayyid Ali. And thereafter, Akbar, he was a liberal person. He was Sunni, but naturally he was a liberal person. He was someone who was trying to find his own way of seeing the world, and that's why his exploration became very prominent. And this is why we see the development of this tradition of paintings. In fact, when we see Akbar, Akbar is linked to Tasveer Khana. Okay, so he established a painting house known as Tasveer Khana, and thereafter the development began. During the initial times, we see a domination of the Persian influence, and during the later times, we see a domination of the influence of India as well as Europe. Let us try to understand what specific are the features of the Persian influence, what are the features of the India, what are the features of the European, because everywhere we find little bit of differences. So when we see Persian influence, okay, Persian influence can be seen in miniature formats, the floral borders, pastel tones, all of this can be linked with the Persian influence. Okay, in fact, when we see the Persian influence, it can be linked even with the two-dimensional paintings that we have. Okay, these book illustrations, these were also the influences which can be linked with the Persian one. Then if you see the Indian influence, the use of rich color, okay, like this peacock blue color which is used a lot, detailed focus on nature, themes from Hindu epics, if we find Ramayana and Mahabharata, and the inspiration that these paintings they got from Rajput as well as Ajanta style. Central Asian influence can also be seen. Royal portraits, military scenes, which reflect the Mughal heritage. Like if we see the case of Babur's overall lineage, it comes from Genghis Khan, it comes from Timur also. So that Central Asian tradition was always there. And those kinds of features can also be found in their paintings, like the royal portraits and the military scene. The most famous of the works includes like Akbarnama, which has Persian layout, Indian faces are used, Jahangir's use of European realism. In fact, the best of the paintings, they belong to Jahangir. During Jahangir, the focus was on portrait painting. The focus was on the painting of nature. Okay, the focus was on ensuring a proper border. And he has confessed in his own autobiography that he was having such good understanding of paintings that he could easily analyze which painter has done work on the painting. So that's something which he was very much interested in, and that can be seen during his time. And then during Shah Jahan, we see elegance. Overuse of the golden color starts during the time of Shah Jahan. So that flair which was there during the Jahangir starts declining under Shah Jahan, and after Shah Jahan, all of you know about Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb again, he was not someone who was going to give patronage to painting. That's why regional schools of painting developed after that. Okay. So for conclusion, you can write the Mughal painting merged diverse tradition into a refined art form that symbolized political power and cultural unity. So these are some of the broader traditions which can be seen at this point of time. Let us see further. Okay, so if we see Akbar, as we have just seen, royal histories, they were the themes of Akbarnama, Babarnama, right? Indian epics of Ramayana as well as Mahabharata, court scenes, battles, religious tolerance, all this can be seen. Techniques like large teams of Indians and Persian artists, like I've told you, Tasveer Khana. So it was a department where multiple people used to work. Different painters had different form of expertise. So those are the things which can be seen. Like one of the famous painter of this time was Dashwant. So he was a famous painter of the time of Mughals. Bold lines, flat background, vibrant opaque watercolors with Persian influence. So this can be seen during the time of Akbar. By the time of Jahangir, we find the best kind of paintings focused on royal portraits, nature studies, okay, birds, flowers. We had Ustad Mansoor, who was a very famous person. Okay, Ustad Mansoor, very famous person with respect to this. Spiritual symbolism can be seen, and realism with light and shadow can be found. European influence on perspective, shading, perspectives like we find halo, we find roaring clouds, and that is something which is a European influence during this time. So, in general, if we see, the art was broadly about political as well as cultural unity. And while Jahangir emphasized elegance, realism, and personal expression, that is exactly what we see here. Now, as I've told you, painting is something which not only developed during the time of the Mughals. In the Hindu tradition, paintings also led a different kind of a theme, but in general, we do find the broader level of significance in these areas also. So please see Mewar school. So if we see the area of Udaipur, right? So here we find the themes includes Ramayana, Bhagavad Puran, Krishna, royal life, and even rituals. If we see the styles, it includes bright red colors. We are using yellows, greens, flat 2D figures are there with large fish-shaped eyes, right? If you see the eyes, they will look like the fish. Devotional and formal, right? Both are there. And the most famous series is the Ragmala series by Sahibdin. That's one of the most famous this. If you see the Marwar school from Jodhpur, large number of different themes are there. Folk legend is there. Love story becomes a very important theme. The most important themes of Dhola Maru, the story is linked to them. They can be seen here. Focused on royal weddings is there. Daily court life is there. If we see their style, again, vibrant colors, flat backgrounds, decorative borders, and expressive women with long faces, that can be seen here. A little less visible, but you can see here, if you see their faces, they're more elongated so that they can show more expressions. So these painters, they find different ways of conveying the meaning of life. They find different ways of conveying the emotions, and that is exactly what we see in these different kinds of paintings. So these characters in the Marwar school are more lively, narrative, as well as they are folk inspired. Malwa school of painting also developed from 1600 to 1700. There is a blend of regional Jain manuscript as well as Mughal style in these kinds of paintings. Let us see further. If we see the style of Malwa, 2D figures are there, delicate line work is there, themes broadly the same, okay, Ramayana, Bhagavad Puran, Ragmala, and these palace, the Mughal influence, paper paintings and more traditional also, right? They lack royal portraits, so that is not an important feature. The art likely commissioned from traveling artists by the Datia ruler, so that's something which we see here, right? So people coming from outside, they were responsible for increasing the overall vibrancy of the art of painting, and probably they sold their work to the royals, and that's how we have seen the paintings, and larger kind of changes can be seen in their paintings also. Then if you see the paintings of the Malwas, it's more of a cultural fusion. So cultural fusion is something which becomes very prominent during this time. So painting as a theme, it remains important. Mughal paintings can come in the exam at any point of time. So I would say at least focus on the Mughal painting and compare them with the Rajput painting, okay? Because the Mughal paintings broadly, they were more secular in nature. While if you see these Rajput paintings, lots of religious themes are there. And if you see broader differences, right, court art remains very dominant in Mughal painting. Here court art was there, but that was not the dominant one. There are different kinds of other paintings which we find here. And if you see with respect to influence, here regional traditions are more in Rajput paintings. In the Mughals, the blend is there, Indian plus Persian plus even the Europeans. So those kinds of differences you can always create to fetch the maximum number of marks, right? With respect to preparing for mains, I always advise create frameworks. The more frameworks you have, the better kind of structuring is going to come in, and eventually more number of marks are going to follow. So please focus on these areas, because art and culture is something which is just like an ocean, right? The number of topics are humongous. The outcome every time may not come. So because of all these things, I often say focus on those areas which are very important for the exam, plus have a structure, because after reading, if you're not able to write, then it means there's a very big lacuna. Next, please see the influence of Bhakti movement, right? The Pahari paintings, they are also influenced by the Bhakti movement in general. So when we see the Bhakti movement, it is having two major areas, Shaguna Bhakti and Nirguna Bhakti. So here we find the influence of the Shaguna Bhakti. The focus is on Radha Krishna love theme. Then inspired by Bhagavad Puran, Gita Govinda, okay, Rasika Priya. All these are the various themes that we find Emotional expression can be seen. Gods are depicted with human emotion, love, longing, joy, and scenes like Ras Leela dances, Krishna lifting Govardhan Hill, okay, that can be found in the Kangra school. So all those kinds of themes can be seen here effectively. So these are some of the features which can be linked with the painting, right? Their gentle, expressive faces are there. Soft, soothing colors are often utilized. So in general, if you see the Pahari school of painting, the use of the religious themes is on the higher side. And along with that, the regional traditions have helped in the evolution of the art of painting in this region, and which includes celebration for personal love for God, right? So these are the paintings which we see from the medieval era. Some paintings can be linked with the modern era also. Some personalities are being linked to that, right? And if we see, two people stand out. One is Raja Ravi Verma, and second is Abhindranath Tagore, which can be linked roughly during the time of the Savdeshi movement. So these two have also played a very important role with respect to evolution of the style of paintings. Like if we see Ravi Raj Verma, he became very famous for merging Indian mythological themes with European realism and oil painting. He also painted and idolized gods, goddesses, making them relatable to the middle class, and more importantly, he set up a printing press to mass produce the calendar art, democratizing the sacred imagery. Okay, democratizing the images. If we see Abhindranath Tagore, so he is someone who led this Bengal school of art. They rejected the West. Naturally, the cultural revivalism was an important theme during the Savdeshi movement. I hope all of you know about the cultural, the Atma Shakti which is there, right? The constructive movement which we find. That's why there was a rejection of Western realism and oil paints. The focus was on the inspiration from Ajanta, Mughals, and even the Japanese art, right? The Asian culture in general. And what do you find here? The focus is on Indian spirituality and more importantly, nationalism, like the painting of Bharat Mata. It helped in uniting the people of India. And here, art was not only just about expression of human expression. Here, art became more and more linked to morality as well as cultural revival. And that's why this is broader, which we see. If we see a difference between these two, Verma used the Western methods to popularize Indian myth, while Tagore focused more on the indigenous style to inspire nationalism. Okay, this is something which you find in comparison of these two. Now, in general, less question come from modern part of the art and architecture. Still, we have covered one or two themes, so you can just go through them. Okay, you can just go through them. ज़्यादा दिक्कत आएगा नहीं. Now, we go towards dance forms. All of you know that when we talk about classical dance forms, they are based upon the rules which were led by the Bharat Muni and his Natya Shastra. Natya Shastra. And here we find the expression of Bhav, Ras as well as Natya. These things are always going to be there. If we see the broader classical dances in India, we have 8 dances as per the Sahitya Natak Academy. But if we see Ministry of Culture, they have also added Chhau as an important classical dance. But in general, you can write both. Okay, if main answer writing is there, the diversity can be shown, like 2 different types of recognition we have in India. Now, Bharatnatyam. If we see Bharatnatyam, to which state does it belongs to? It belongs to Tamil Nadu. What are the important features? So this initially it started in that it is having a temple origin. Okay, then focus on geometric poses there. It is very devotional in nature. It has been in news also. Okay, recently I think one of the dancer had made a big record also, you know, which is going into Guinness Book record also. Now, what is this overall dance famous for? This dance is a reflection of fire element. Okay, it's a reflection of fire element, and that makes it a bit different from others. Kathak is very famous, right, from North India, specifically the area of UP. Persian influence can be easily found because it is an intermingling area, right? And more importantly, footwork is very important, right? Footwork, the stamping of the feet is very important in this dance. Jugalbandi is very important between the person who is playing the instrument and between the person who is dancing. There's a certain Jugalbandi here, and in general, there is also a sense of storytelling. So when we combine all this, Kathak becomes a very vibrant dance form. Then we have Odissi. Odissi is famous for creating poses which are just like sculpture. Tribhangi posture is also there, which is very famous. Tribhangi means the bends, the three bends that we have in the body, right? They are represented well. And we find a certain level of feminine grace also. Kuchipudi, we find from Andhra Pradesh, okay? Here we find dance drama format. So the person who are dancing here, they have to also say some specific lines also, right, with respect to this. So it is a mixture of dance as well as drama. Brisk movement is there, right? So here there is a tradition also of having a very specific kind of a footwork. And we find dancers also using the brass plate, and they try to balance themselves towards the edges of that plate. And eventually, that is what is the brisk movement we find here. Kathakali is again a very famous dance from Kerala. If we see Kathakali, the use of the human face and the emotions linked to this is probably the best dance which is possible. Different kinds of colors are utilized, okay? Different makeups are there, masks are there, dramatic storytelling is there, and the use of the facial expression is of next level. And different kinds of colors shows different kinds of moods, different kinds of divinity can be found. That is exactly which we find in Kathakali. Mohiniyattam, a lot of focus, right? In general, when we talk about dance, we see there's a balance between the Lasya and the Tandav component. But here, the Lasya Tanda or the feminine component is very much dominating, right? And we find graceful movement, right? And Mohiniyattam is often linked with the story of Vaishnavism, where Vishnuji, when he realized that the asurs, they're going to get nectar, है ना, उनके पास सारा का सारा वरदान पहुंचने वाला था. So at that point of time, he took a feminine form so that he can get the nectar from them. अमृत जो है उनके पास नहीं रहना चाहिए था. Manipuri, if you see, the state is very clear. Manipur, devotional Vaishnavite themes are there, and plus we find delicate movements. So that is something which we find here, right? So if you see the dress of the girls in this dance, so they are restrictive in nature. So that's why fast movements are not there. So focus is on the graceful movement for the performance part. And finally, if you see Satriya, it is linked with the monasteries, the dance which began in the area of Assam, and again a very prominent dance form even till today. So these are some of the classical dances that we have, right? The 8 classical dances as per Sahitya Natak Academy, and more importantly, Chhau is also included by Ministry of Culture. That you can mention. That is not something which will be wrong, but always mention the source. If you mention the source, the chances of somebody deducting your marks is always going to be on the lesser side. That improves the quality of answer writing also. We have seen the dance. Let us now focus on music. When we talk about music specifically, okay, there are two forms, two classical forms that we have, Hindustani and Carnatic. Both have their strength and weaknesses that we have. The features can be linked, okay? The features can be linked. So please see, if we see the origin, it is very crystal clear. The Carnatic music comes from the southern part of India. The interlinkages between Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Karnataka and Kerala becomes responsible for the rise of the Carnatic music. Hindustani music is more relatively about the exchange of the music between North India and the Persian elements. So here, UP, Punjab, Delhi, this is the area where we see its development, but the overall transition can be seen even from the areas of the Pakistan also. If we see historical development, Carnatic music evolved in temples and devotional traditions, while the Hindustani was more about royal courts and had Persian as well as Islamic influence. The languages in which it is composed, it includes Telugu, Sanskrit, Tamil, Kannada as well as Malayalam, exactly the states which are linked to its overall origin. And if we see with respect to North India, Hindustani, Hindi, Urdu, Sanskrit, Braj, Persian, these are some of the languages in which we see the compositions. Next, we can see the focus. The main focus, if you see in the Carnatic, it's on the vocals. Vocals are very, very important. The instruments are relatively less important here. But if we see Hindustani, there's a relative level of balance. So we find emphasis, equal emphasis on both of them. Then if we see Rag and Tal, so fixed number of Rag and Tal is there in the first one. While if we see Hindustani, more flexibility and improvisation can be given here. So the singer is having more flexibility in Hindustani music form. Improvisation, if you talk about it, less improvisation is there in the first one. More structured compositions are there. So, while on the other side, there's greater scope for improvisation. Popular forms like includes Kriti, Varnam, Tilana, Alapana. While on the other side, when we talk about the second form, right, the Hindustani, here we have different forms like Khayal, Drupad, Thumri, Thapa, Tarana. Depending upon the different times, we see the different kinds of singing being practiced and performed. Then the famous composers, if you see, Tyagaraja, Shama Shastri, these are the famous composers that we have. But on the other hand, okay, we see Amir Khusro, Tansen, Vishnu Narayan, Bhatkante. These are the famous composers with respect to the Hindustani school of music. Instruments, veena, mridangam, violin, flute. These are the common instruments which accompany the singing part. While on the other hand, if you see the second, sitar, tabla, sarod, santoor, harmonium, these are utilized for the sake of creating different kinds of tunes along with the Hindustani music. Performance-wise, this is more devotional, the first one, the Carnatic, and it is often linked with these various dance forms also that we have just discussed. While on the other hand, the Hindustani is more secular and elaborate concert style kind of is there, right? So we find different types of concert which are linked. So it is more commercial also in comparison to the Carnatic music in today's times. So there can be a 10-marker question which can be linked with this. Okay, so you can remember the comparison. If you will remember the comparison, broadly it will give you a broader perspective and the marks will be on the higher side, right? Because the whole perspective of this learning that we have for civil services is gaining maximum marks. If you will try to focus too much on the expertise, you will lose marks. We all have limited amount of time. That's why all the teachers, that we also have this focus only on those areas which are important for the examination. In the foundation course, the focus is on the other aspects, but at least in these kinds of courses, these kinds of videos which are marathon series, the focus is on giving you those areas if you can imbibe, you can get a very good marks. All right, let us now move for in the same theme, the Indian classical music, how it has created the cultural, spiritual and regional identity with respect to this. So if we see spiritual roots, all of you know that we have 4 Vedas and Sam Veda that is broadly about the music. The musical connotations are there in the Sam Veda. So it starts from here, right? Udgatari was the priest who used to chant Sam Veda. We found this sound known as Nad, seen as divine, okay, Nad Brahma, and the saints also, Tansen, Tyagaraja, they enriched it. Each rag has specific emotion that all of us need to know, right? Like Bhairavi is there for the peace, and music is often seen as a form of worship. And if we see in north, we have this style of gharana. This lineage is there. Lineage system is very powerful in the Hindustani. Here we gharanas like Gwalior for Drupad, Kirana for Khayal, right? Instruments like sitar, tabla are used. In Carnatic, the compositions are in multiple languages, and we have forms like Kriti, Varnam, instruments like Veena and Mridangam, they are utilized for that. Oral tradition has been very famous. The Guru Shishya Parampara is there. Written forms are not that much preferred. Face-to-face learning is something which is there. So that's why Guru Shishya Parampara remains very, very important in this. And forms like Drupad, Khayal, Kriti, Tilana can be linked to this. Cultural integration has also happened because of this. Like if you see in South India, Bharatanatyam dance is performed only with the Carnatic music, right? Only with in the sense that it is an integral part. Both when they combine, it creates the divinity, it creates the magic which is effectively seen by all of us. Then temple iconography, it is linked with that also. Mythological themes in compositions, right? That we also find. And if we see Sangeet Natak Academy, right? That is something which is linked to this. They are revivaling this. And globalization by artists like Ravi Shankar, right, who is no more, but he is someone who played a very important role in the revival, and he is someone who got a Grammy also, which shows the recognition from the world community also. So Ravi Shankar was a very important ambassador of Indian culture, and you can always write about him with respect to the popularization of Indian art. UNESCO has also recognized, right, all of you know this various lists which are there of the UNESCO. They are also helpful with respect to the revival of the Indian culture, with respect to recognition of the Indian culture. All those things we can see. So if we see Indian classical music, it remains dynamic blend of devotion, regional diversity, and creative expression. So when we combine all of this, okay, naturally a better kind of a tradition is set up. So we have discussed the first theme. In the first theme, we largely discussed about paintings. Then we discussed about terracotta. We discussed about broadly Ashoka's theme also. We discussed about the broader theme with respect to sculpture. We discussed about the other themes also, right? As we have just seen, the music, dance, all of them. So we are trying to cover all the themes which are possible in the minimum amount of time, giving you the maximum pointers which can be very, very useful for the examination. Let us now move further. Okay, the next major theme that we have, it is literature. Again, UPSC has been asking question on literature in prelims also, in mains also. Like in mains, they have targeted the Persian literature in the recent times. And this is where you have to become very, very cautious, because the biggest challenge with literature is that you cannot just write features. You have to remember the names. If names are not there, naturally the marks will not be there. So all of you need to be very aware about this. Awareness is the most important thing when it comes to literature. So let us see. When we see Indian literature, it reflects country's cultural richness and changing social values, spanning from the ancient sacred texts and epics to modern nationalist writings, right? So please see, when we talk about rituals, which we'll talk about literature. So Vedic literature is very famous. It is a very sacred part for the Hindus. And if we see Vedas, 4 Vedas are there, starting from the Rig, Sam, Yajur and Athar. That is also a very important form of literature. In general, when we talk about literature, when we see with respect to Hinduism, 2 types of traditions are there, Shruti and Smriti. Shruti means something which has been heard by human beings, but they have not been written by them. They have been revealed to the sages by the god in deep meditative stages. That is what is known as the Vedas. Vedas is linked to Shruti. Smriti is the remaining tradition, okay, which includes Puranas, which includes epics, which includes Dharma Shastras, Vedangas. So these are the 2 major traditions when we see with respect to literature. So I thought of discussing this so that you can at least remember, okay? So in the Brahminical religion, this is the tradition that we have. Similarly, if we go towards Buddhism, Tripitaka becomes very famous. The sacred literature that we have, canonical literature. 3 parts are there. Okay, so we have Sutta Pitaka, we have Vinaya Pitaka, and we have Abhidhamma. Sutta Pitaka consists of sayings of Buddha. Vinaya Pitaka consists of the traditions, the rules with respect to the Sangha, which is established for both monks as well as nuns. Abhidhamma, this is the text on ethics. This also explains the philosophy of Buddhism. The sayings of Buddha, they are explained. That is something which we find with respect to Tripitaka. In Jainism, we have Agamas or Siddhanta. They have been composed in the 2 Jaina councils. So these are the broad text, broad traditions which we see with respect to literature. With the period of time, literature became very paramount. Okay, literature is something which is very much linked to the humans. So let us see. We see when we talk about Jain and Buddhist literature, all of you know their rise starts in the 6th century BC. The rise of Mahavir, the rise of Siddhartha, and the focus is on personal ethics, moral conduct, as well as liberation. So what is the overall impact of this literature? So we see it has shaped religious doctrines. It has also shaped the ethical norms. All right. Then what are the specific ethical sayings in this canonical text? Canonical text means those texts which are very integral part of any religion. They are known as canonical. So please see, in Ahimsa, when we talk about Jain text focus on absolute non-violence, and that is something which we find in the Acharanga Sutra. Middle path and compassion, again we find this in Buddhist Tripitakas, right? The focus on the right kind of conduct, you will find this in both traditions, okay, right? Like the Ashtanga mark that we have in Buddhism, right? Similarly, we have the jewels in Jainism. All of them, they focus about right kind of path to be followed by the human beings. And that is exactly what you will find here. They both promote merit, okay? They both promote merit over the caste or over the Varna system which was there. Like in Buddhism, the moment you join the Sangha, you become a Varna. Your Varna melts away. And now you have become part of the Sangha itself. So that is something which you find in the Buddhism. For Mahavir also, Varna was not linked to the birth. Varna was something which was linked to the occupation, which was linked to the way you conduct in your life. And that is exactly which is something which we find here. Then social and communal ethics can also be found here. Like if we find Jataka's tales or even the Jaina text, they focus on righteous kingship models and they promote Dhamma-based rule in general. So ethical kingship can be found here. Then tolerance and pluralism can be found. The various principles you find in Jainism, Anekantvad, Sayyadvad, these are very beautiful, right? They are someone who are able to foster tolerance, they're able to foster philosophical dialogue. Community discipline can be found in Vinaya Pitaka. Yes, so rules have been set for monks as well as nuns. Because if you want to focus on the spiritual life, you should have certain rules. Because if you live life like common men, spiritual life is eventually going to become a hallucination for you. That's why for ensuring proper conduct, these rules were created. Respect for women also can be found. Look, in the Brahminical religion, women, their religious aspirations were not given much kind of importance. That's why when Buddhism and Jainism started, it was a big question that would they solve this social problem? So if we see in Buddhism, naturally they were made part of the Sangha, even though not in the beginning, during the later stages, right? But still, the same kind of treatment was given to male as well as female. With respect to Jainism also, they were allowed to have this notion that they can achieve liberation. So all these are the tradition. Again, depending upon the school, Digambar and Shwetambar, there is a difference with respect to this. So that we need to know. But in general, they acknowledged the spiritual potential for lay followers as well as women. Lay followers means the common followers. For women also, like let me give you an example. There is a specific text, Therigatha. In Therigatha, we find the compositions of women, compositions of nun, and many of them, they tell us about the stories of enlightenment. So these compositions of nun can be found in Therigatha. There are very few texts in ancient India which are linked to women. Okay, and this is one of the texts which is linked to women, which shows a greater level of acceptance, a greater level of understanding of the culture of the human nature from the point of view of women. That is something which we find here, and it has multiple influences on Indian traditions. Like same kind of influence can be seen in medieval India with respect to Bhakti and the Sufi traditions which we have later on. Literary legacy is also there, right? The focus on didactic learning, moral reasoning in Jatakas as well as the Panchatantra focus on education, folk culture, children's literature. Ashokan edict also promoted tolerance, respect for elders, kindness to animals, right? The Dhamma in general, the conduct for do's and don'ts. And finally, focus on law and society, ethical intention, non-possession, it have legal reasoning as well as the social reforms. Multiple people say that Buddhism and Jainism, they were social reforms under the overall umbrella of religion. And that's exactly what we find in their text, in their literature. So you can remember this, okay, the principles of Ashoka's Dhamma, major which we have, right? Next, we see what are the different perspectives which we find in Kautilya's Arthashastra. Let us try to understand it. Okay. So when we see Kautilya's Arthashastra, again, this is a little bit of a contested discussion. Kautilya's Arthashastra, when we see from the perspective of NCRT, it was linked to Maurya. If we see the latest research, people are now linking it more to post-Maurya. This understanding is changing. So, irrespective of that, let us have a discussion. Okay. So, it's a famous treatise on statecraft. It provides information about the state which would be formed in the future. It does not talk about a state which is present. So it's always about the possibilities. Anyway, it blends ethics and realpolitik, right? That's something which you find morality as well as the realism, isn't it? And it's a very famous way of articulating Raj Dharma, okay, the focus on moral duties of rulers. So all of you know this talks about the concept of Saptanga Rajya, the 7 elements of the state. The king is considered as the linchpin of all of them. Along with that, we had Mitra, Kosh, Janapada, Amatya, Durga and Danda. So this is what is known as Saptanga Rajya theory, the 7 limbs of the state. That is something which you find in this. Along with this, the focus on the duties of the king. The king is given a very important role. The king is required to be skilled in multiple disciplines, which includes warfare, which includes ethics, which includes philosophy, right? So too much was expected from the king, right? If you see today's politicians, they won't be able to pass this. Next, primacy of law. Law was to be given the maximum respect, and it has to be something which is to be there, and they have to maintain the order so that Matsya is not there, right? Then Dhaniti, it is important. And finally, Niti Shastra. Niti Shastra is something which is very important. Focus on pragmatic virtue of the abstract morality. Right, it's just like a similar kind of text we find in the medieval from the Europe, which is very famous, right? Coming from one of the most prominent personality, Machiavelli, the prince, which is often linked to this. So, what's the kind of reconciliation that we find in this text? Number one, you'll see that end justify the means. So, for them, it is very important that the state survives. If state will become unstable, all the people living in that are going to be affected by it. That's why it's important to keep the state in a very specific manner. Next, he used strategic level of ethics. Samadama Dandabhed. Okay, so ethical means preferred, coercive measures used when required. Public welfare remain very important. In fact, this text can be linked to good governance. If you have read the second ARC report, in second ARC report, we have seen the use of the sayings of Kautilya. Kautilya talks about in the happiness of the subjects lay the happiness of the king. That's the foundation of good governance. Okay, I would advise all of you to please remember these lines in case a question comes in, and please write it in the exam. Okay, in the happiness of the subjects lay the happiness of the king. Public welfare became very prominent, and training the ruler was very important. The king must be self-controlled, philosophically trained, and avoid personal pleasures. Exactly what I've told you. Okay, what was expected from the king was something important. Same, the expectations from the ministers were very important. They should have integrity. They should be uncorruptible. That is exactly what we see from the Arthashastra. So overall, if we see what is its influence in the long run. So this is the only major text with respect to statecraft in India. So this has created a blueprint for bureaucracy, revenue, as well as the legal systems. In fact, revenue. If you see the motto of IRS income tax, it is Kosh Mulodand. Revenue is the foundation of the state. Again, it comes directly from whom? It comes from Kautilya. So even the Indian government is influenced to a very high level by this text. Kosh Mulodand, revenue is the foundation of the state. Then political realism, very, very important. So our Shastra offers a rational secular model of governance that we see here. Ethics is also contextualized here. Okay, so ethical norms redefined for governance, and there's a balance of dharma and artha, material welfare and the moral welfare. So we call it ethical pragmatism, right? So overall, if you see, Kautilya Darsha stands testament to ancient India's sophisticated political philosophy, and that is exactly what we can see here. So these are very important topics. I would advise all of you to make running notes in case you do not have enough time. Okay, so you can make running notes and you can utilize it for the better answer writing. Next important topic that we have is Sangam Literature. 2013 UPSC asked this. This was question number 1. Okay, so what kind of prominent social and economic features can we see from the Sangam literature? When you talk about Sangam literature, you have to remember the time period is from 300 BC to 300 AD. Second, Pandyans, they were the one who invited this Sangam literature, right? Who invited these poets who became part of this Sangam, this confluence. 3 Sangams happened, first at Madurai, then at Kapatapuram, again at Madurai. So this is how we see the creation of the Sangams. And it's a secular kind of literature. Very, very important. Please try to remember, okay? Please try to remember that overall, when we talk about Sangam literature, 3 texts are going to be there: Tolkapiyam, Atutogai, and Patupatu. The Tolkapiyam is the text, it's the oldest text with respect to Tamil grammar. And first 2 specific books of Tolkapiyam, it belongs to the Sangam age. Atutokai, again the 8th anthology, and Patupatu, the 10 important idols or songs. They provide us a lot of information about the Sangam age. So if we see with respect to social structure and norms, they tell us about the social order, they tell us about the Velis, who are the minor chieftains, the kings, merchants, farmers, all of them, they are mentioned here. Second, the role of women. Okay, so women were having diversified role in the society. They are depicted as those as poetess also, like we have Avayar. Public figures are there, okay, and certain kind of caste restrictions are there. Kingship and heroism is also very important. In fact, the culture of Veeram stone, okay, the hero stone was very popular here. Someone who gave life for the tribe, nobody was going to forget them, and they were given maximum honor in the society. That's exactly which we find here. So focus on lineage, family honor, and martial values like Veeram is very important. Then religious life. So we find secular gods like Murugan, Vishnu without dominant religious institutions. So lots of understanding can be understood about these social structure as well as the norms. In fact, you need to understand that during the Sangam age, these people were aware about the Varna system, but the rigidity which was there in the north, that had not creeped in the society. So that's a relatively positive kind of a factor in South India. Then if we find the portrayal of economic activities, so all the major economic activities can be seen. If we see with respect to agriculture, we do find the description of paddy fields, irrigation, monsoon dependence. If we talk about trade and context, so yes, they do mention Greek, Romans, poor port, trade in pearls, spices, textiles can be seen. Craft production can be seen. We see references to weavers, goldsmith, blacksmith. Famous cities like Madurai, references are given from Madurai at multiple levels. Right, so we need to remember about this. 2 types of poems we find, Akam and Puram. Akam is more about emotions, it's more about love. Puram is more about warfare, it's about war. So those kinds of things we find here, right? So personal emotions through natural imagery, and Puram poems we find valor, generosity, public life. And Purananuru praises the kings for that purpose. And that's exactly what we find, okay? The 2 types of poems are there, Akam and Puram. There are certain limitations, like when we try to understand the political life from the Sangam literature, it becomes a big limitation. Why? Because everything is like of eulogical nature, right? Badha chadha ke bataya hua sab kuch, and that makes it very problematic. So they have exaggerated heroism and ideal love in general. Second, elite biasness is there, because since majority of the compositions, they are from the court poets, we do not find much of the references from the marginalized voices, and that is exactly what we need to remember. Next, chronological ambiguity is also there, like it's very hard to date the poems. You see, it's from 300 BC to 300 AD. What does that tell us? It tells us only one thing, right? It is around 600 years. How would you define which belongs to the earlier phase, which belongs to the later phase? And that becomes a big limitation when we use Sangam, the text, as a source of history. some form of corroboration, etc. is also required, right? Like when we go for the cross verification, we find that Roman trade in Pliny and Ptolemy, it matches some of the Sangam references. Second, cross-cultural influences can also be seen, like the ideas of honor, etc. can be seen, remain central even till today. And the hero worship you can find, okay, the hero worship remains a very integral part of the southern society. When we see the film star becoming politicians very easily, okay, that's something which we don't find in North India, because in North India hero worship is not there, but in South India hero worship is there. So people are so much linked, okay, to the heroes of the society. Next, ecological zonation, like Tinai links geography with social activity. So in general, it's a very important for understanding the history of early South India. Later on, we see the Brahmanization of the society, starting majorly from the Pallava period, and thereafter the society's characteristics kept on changing with the period of time. So that's exactly what we can find here. Then Kalidas literary work, okay, that is our next topic. So when we see Kalidas, Kalidas represents one of the most important part of the overall literature, right? So Kalidas represents one of the most important part of the literature, and that's exactly what we need to understand here. So let us try to see. So Kalidas, probably the greatest Sanskrit poet which is there, and because of him, we call Guptas as the classical age of the Sanskrit literature. Lots of examples are there: Abhigyan Shakuntalam, Raghuvamsha, Meghdut, Kumarasambhava. All of this is this kind of information. Okay, these kinds of creations can be linked to Kalidas. If we see what kind of ethos he's talking about, so with respect to kingship, he idolizes king as dharmic rulers. In imperial culture, he gave patronage to Sanskrit literature, royal arts. All those information can be seen from the Gupta rulers. And finally, the linkage of state and society. He thinks that kings should protect material prosperity and spiritual values. So that is the kind of ideas which we find here. With respect to culture and aesthetic flourishing, nature imagery can be seen like Meghdutam, okay? So it is linked to the clouds, which reflects romanticism, which reflects even the appreciation of the nature. Aesthetic values can also be seen like the use of the Sanskrit, it becomes the elite language. Gender roles like character like Shakunda, they reflect the Gupta ideals of virtue of those times. Then if we talk about intellectual and philosophical themes, again, this is exactly where we find the more emphasis on dharma, artha and karma, right? So all of us know about the purusharthas, they become important. Character becomes very prominent in general in his writings. Mythology, so we find references to Ramayana, Mahabharata and Puran deities, they come a lot in his work. And finally, when we talk about philosophy, so there's mention of renunciation, leaving everything behind, fate, cosmic order. So multiple such things you can find in his narratives. So that's exactly what we find in the overall Kalidas narration. What kind of socio-economic life can we find in his narrations? So when we talk about socio-economic life, urban culture can be seen, right? So it indicates an elite society with respect to the compositions. Patriarchal structure of society can be seen. So if we see in general the Gupta society, okay, patriarchy increases, but at the same time the concept of Istridhan also comes in. So there is a little bit of dichotomy in the society. Sati system evolves, at the same time the women, the religious aspirations were given more catering, like they were allowed to listen to the Puranas. So those kinds of schism can be seen in the society. Society is a very complex kind of a creature. It does not give a very definite pathway all the time. Okay, very few moments come, and that is something which we link with respect to the revolutions. But in this case, this depiction of the gender roles can be seen very clearly, and the society's hierarchy can also be seen here at this point of time. If we see the festivals and rituals, right, so public festivities, marriages and temple rituals, all of this can be seen at this point of time. So if we see broad framework of Kalidas and his work, so his work is a masterpiece. It is celebrated in India as one of the most important person who is linked to the overall Sanskrit culture, and with respect to literature, they are given maximum celebration. Right, so these are some of the things which you need to remember with respect to Kalidas. Now, UPSC can ask you dynamic questions also, like with respect to education from ancient India, with respect to suppose the two famous universities. Like already in 2014, they asked this question that the Nalanda and Nalanda as well as Takshila, both were centers of learning. but Takshila was not given the overall status as a university, right? So for that, you should be little bit aware about them, right? Like Takshila, no specific kind of framework was there. Guru Shishya Parampara was there. There was no specific kind of time frame which was there. So because so much of liberal form of education was there, it was difficult to give the overall nomenclature of university. And with respect to Nalanda, specific rigid structure was there, which is often linked with the university life, which is often linked with the university in general. So let us see, when we talk about Nalanda, so it was a famous center of learning. All of you know it is linked to Kumar Gupta first, and over the period of time, it became one of the biggest residential university. Okay, thousands of students used to live here, and if we see, it becomes the symbol of India's intellectual prowess as well as Mahayana Buddhism. So what kind of tradition do we see from there? So the focus, if you see with respect to learning, it was on reasoning, the focus was on inference, the focus was on logic. So all this shows that it was not just linked to religion, it was linked to multiple methods utilization for the sake of education. Second, it hosted scholars from all the major religions, Buddhist, Hindu, Jain, even though Buddhism dominated, but others were also allowed. Foreign traditions were also allowed. Two famous travelers, Fayan, Hun Sang, later on even It Singh, they came and visited this university. So that shows us that what was the level of this university, that the people used to come from outside. During the Pala period, large number of scholars, they came from Tibet. They used to come and live in this Nalanda University. So Nalanda University is something which is very, very famous. In fact, during the time of the Palas, the revenue of 200 villages was dedicated to Nalanda, because since it was having a lot of expenditure, it cannot function without the support of the state. That's why universities, the linkage of education with the polity can be seen very clearly in the case of Nalanda. Then integration of the scripture study with meditative practices, that is also what we see, right? And we also find focus on direct experience and inner transformation. So a very holistic kind of a personality was created at Nalanda. That's why education should always be about character development. It should not be about rote learning, and that's exactly what we see in these kinds of institutions. And that's why India has revived Nalanda University in the recent times. Then philosophical contribution, if you see from this place, so it became a center for Madhyamika, Yogacharya schools. It also advanced the concept of Shunyata as well as Vijapati Mathura. Then Dharmakirti and Digna, these were the prominent personality who reshaped Indian logic. They also influenced Tibet as well as the East Asian philosophies during the later times. And finally, if you see, the emphasis on knowledge, the emphasis on ethical life, the emphasis on liberation can be found at this place. Broadly, if you see the pedagogy, what kind of syllabus was there? So we do find grammar, we do find logic, metaphysics, arts, everything was there. And most importantly, Guru Shishya Parampara was followed here also. Admission was also based upon philosophical debates. So if suppose at the time of the entrance, there was no exam, okay, but the philosophical debates were there. They used to see if you're ready for the induction into the course or not. So those kinds of ideas were there. If we see through different kind of estimates, around 10,000 students and 2,000 teachers were there. That creates the student-teacher ratio of 1:5, right? So something which is very, very unique, because even in today's times, we try to create a teacher-student ratio of around 1:30. So that shows the kind of input which used to come from the teachers was very, very important. And that's something which we even in the modern times need to learn from Nalanda, because this education, it's a very big responsibility for the teacher. It's a very important responsibility, and until and unless there is a physical presence and until there is a linkage with between the teacher and the students, it's very difficult to impart certain kinds of learnings. So if we see Nalanda as a whole, it became a major tradition for reason, debate, okay, as well as ethics, and one of the most favored educational model across the world. That's something which we can find here. Then overall, if we see the development of the Sanskrit language during the Gupta period, let us try to see something about that also. So when we talk about this, okay, so we have famous people like Kalidas, and he elevated the overall Kavya. He is known for all of them like Abhigyan Shakuntalam as well as Meghadutam. Sanskrit play also became prominent during this time. We see standardization of the Sanskrit. So it became more classical by this time, right? In fact, it's the epitome, and large number of poetic theories influenced by Natya Shastra can be seen at this time. If we see broader integration, right, so we find multiple spiritual themes, we find philosophical poetry like Bhagavad Gita, mythology also comes to the base, right? All of you should need to know the final compositions of the multiple themes happened during the Gupta period. The final composition of the Dharma Shastra, the final composition of Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranas, all of this, it broadly happens during the Gupta period. So that gives us an idea that what was the level of achievement in the Sanskrit language, and all these different studies can be seen during this period. Let us see further. Like when we talk about state ideology and cultural legitimacy, that can also be seen, right? Like poets are linked the king to divine avatars, like all of you know about Samudragupta, right? They also aligned royal duties with cosmic order, Raj Dharma, reinforced the Brahminical orthodoxy also, at least among the higher caste, and more importantly, education patronage was there. Nalanda was given the support, which shows that education and statecraft, they were having very good linkages at this point of time. Then we had Navratna in the court of the Guptas. Like if you see Kalidas, we have discussed a lot about him. Okay, Amar Sima, very important. Okay, so he is someone who has written Amar Kosha, which is a kind of a lexicon. It's a kind of a dictionary. Okay, so he is lexicographer of those times. Dhanvantari, he was linked to medicine. He has written multiple texts, okay, on medicine, sometimes filled with Ayurveda system also. Brahmir he is linked to astronomy as well as astrology. The famous Brihat Samhita as well as Panch Siddhantika can be seen here. Then Vararuchi is linked to linguistic and grammar. He gave contributions to phonetics as well as the Sanskrit grammar. Then Vital Bhatt is linked to magic, tantras, right, known for different kinds of mysticism. Then Ghatakapara is linked to the classical poetries. So these are some of the important personalities from the court. We also have Shanku and Shapanaka. So the first one is linked to architecture with measurements architecture. The second one is again linked to astrology and philosophy. It will be very difficult to remember all their names. So I would advise just remember 3, 4. The first 4 would do good enough, okay, because majority of the student will not remember even them. So Kalidas, Amarsimha, Dhanvantari and Varahamir. If you can remember even this much, I would see this as a victory, because in the exam hall, okay, when we study we become idealistic. When we reach the exam hall, we don't have anything. So it's better to be practical from the beginning when you want to clear the examination, right? Idealism is there. You can keep it and you can use it for the time of when you become an officer. So after that you can use the idealism in the administration, but in preparation it's always about the broader dynamism and practicalism. Now Krishna Deva Raya, 2016 UPSC asked a question in mains, okay, that Krishna Deva Raya himself was a great scholar and he also gave patronage to large number of people. So if we see Krishna Deva Raya, okay, Krishna Deva Raya, his time period is from 1509 to 1529, contemporary of Babur, right? So he is someone who again is linked to golden age of this South India. So when we see his patronage, so number one, he himself was a scholar in Telugu, Kannada, Sanskrit as well as Tamil, a person with diversified talents. One of the most famous is linked to Telugu, like Amuktamalada, right? Then we have Ashtadigas, 8 important personalities who were there in his court. Most famous among them is Alasi Pedana, Tenali Rama, all of them. We see poetry of Telugu, okay, the famous Prabandha style developed during this time. And when we see Sanskrit scholarship, that can also be seen, okay, like Vallabhacharya as well as Vyas Tirtha. They are the scholars linked to Sanskrit. He also wrote in Sanskrit. He wrote Jambavati Kalyanam. So those kinds of texts can be found which are linked to the king, which can be linked to the Krishna Deva Raya. So if we see a certain level of integration of literary with the other works also during this time. Amuktamalada, like I've told you, it is written in Telugu. It blends devotion with political wisdom. So both are there. It is a mixture of religion as well as the overall focus on a system of sovereignty. And it's a very, very important text. He also sets standards for the Telugu literature and also has good enough work in Kannada as well as Sanskrit. Like I told you, in Sanskrit he has written Jambavati Kalyanam. Then we see the merger of bhakti with classical aesthetics during this time. Large number of linguistic groups, they become part of the Vijayanagar, right? So that's why we often say Vijayanagar became the cultural capital of South India during the time of Krishnadevaraya. These 20 years, okay, these 2 decades played a very important role in the integration, in the exchange of the word, exchange of the vocabulary from one to another. And that's exactly what we need to remember. Then Ashtadigaja, the prominent pillars of the Vijayanagar kingdom, okay, who are linked to the literature. So famous people are there. Here also I would advise go for 3, 4. Okay, beyond that it's next to impossible. But anyway, so what was the most prominent part of this? So these Ashtadigaja, they became responsible for elevation of the status of Telugu. Like if we talk about Alasani Pedana, he is known as Andhra Kavita Pitama, or the father of the Telugu. Then Prabandha style, again this became very famous, and the most famous is Manucharitam by Alhasani Pedana. So that is also very important. Bhakti and moral values, cultural nationalism, all those kinds of things can be seen, right? Nationalism in local terms, not in the level of the any major kind of terms. That is not going to be there. So Alhasani Pedana, the most famous work is Manucharitam, and it is linked to his title also. Then we have the famous Tenali Ramana. He has written Pandurakka Mahamathyam, and he is known for his wit. He is known for the Bhakti poetry also. So I would always advise go for 2, 3, 4. Don't go beyond that. In the exam hall, it's next to impossible. Even though teaching it can be easy, right? Like Nandi Thimana, he is known for romantic themes, lyrical grace also. Durjati, he has written Kalahasti Mahamatyam, focus on the Shaivism, Shaivi Bhakti. Then Pinigali Surana is also there, okay. He has written Raghava Pandaviyam. It's a dual epic, okay. Literary brilliance can be seen. So lots of these prominent personalities can be seen in their code. So always try to remember 4, 5. That is more than enough, okay, from exam point of view. Okay, that is something which we can remember. So these Ashtadiggaya, they played a very important role in the revival of the classical themes. They reshaped Telugu literature and reflected the intellectual climate of the Krishnadevaraya's court. That is exactly what we can see from this. Alright, that is what we can see from this. Then let us see some literature from the Indo-Persian court also. When we talk about Indo-Persian court, right, so we can include both Delhi Sultanate as well as the Mughals. Like if we see from Delhi Sultanate, Tughlaqnama. Tughlaqnama is written by Amir Khusro. Amir Khusro, a famous poet. And when we talk about Tughlaqnama, okay, the major focus, it is on Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. It is on Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. We can just erase that, right? So major is about Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, the founder, father of Muhammad bin Tughlaq. That is what Tughlaqnama is linked to. Then we have Khazain-ul-Fatu. You can remember about Khazain-ul-Fatu, right? Again written by Amir Khusro. This gives us the broader information about Alauddin Khilji and his famous expeditions. Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi, again it's a misnomer, okay. Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi provide information about multiple sultans. It provide information about Balban, provide information about Alauddin, provide information about Muhammad bin Tughlaq. But the name is Firoz Shah Tughlaq because before his death, Barni has tried his level best, okay, because he was in jail. So that's why he had written this title, and Firoz Shah already had come to power in 1351. That's why the title is Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi, but it only covers 6 years of the reign of Firoz Shah Tughlaq. It largely belongs to the earlier times. So these are some of the important one which you can remember. Next, Babarnama, all of you know. It is linked to Babar. The original name is different, right? The original name which is Tajuke Babari, which is broadly in Turkish, and this has been now changed into Babarnama by Abdul Rahim Khana. So that's so please don't write exactly Babarnama written by Babar. Okay, that would be wrong. So Abdul Rahim Khana is linked to Babarnama. If we go in literal sense, if we go in the generic sense, then it can be like that also. Okay, no major challenges there. Then Akbarnama, all of you know, it is linked to Abul Fazl. Okay, within this Ain Akbari, which is linked to administration, it's a similar part. Pashanama, it is written by Abdul Hamid Lahori. It belongs to the reign of Shah Jahan. Okay, that information is there. Then we have Muntakab Tariq. So this is written by Abdul Qadir Badauni. When we see the reign of Akbar, the official information comes from Abul Fazl. The non-official information, it comes from Abdul Qadir Badauni. So Abdul Qadir Badauni always provides us information in which Akbar has failed. Okay, in which Akbar has failed. So that information we can find in his writings, and that makes it very interesting. Reason being, in general, all these monarchs, they try to hide their limitations. But Abdul Qadir Badauni was someone who was providing this information from behind the scene, and this information was broadly launched after the passing away. After the passing away of Akbar, it became even more famous, because when the main personality is gone, criticism is allowed, and that is exactly what has happened here. Then we have Shahnama-e-Gulshan, written by Muhammad Quli Qutub Shah, okay, which is linked to the Deccan Sultanate, right, Golconda. Diwan of Sauda, right, linked to Mirza Muhammad Rafi Sauda, linked to later Mughal period. So all these are the literature, okay, all these are literature. What were these literature all about? What was the nature of this literature is something which is very important, and let us try to understand that also. So all these broadly, they had certain functions, like royal chronicles, like Tabaqat-e-Nashiri, right, Tabaqat-e-Nashiri, Tariq-e-Firoz-Shahi. So Tabaqat-e-Nashiri, this is written by the earlier person known as Minas-us-Siraz. So he has written about this. This provides information about the military history, the initial part where we see the establishment of the Turkish rule, okay, of the Delhi Sultanate, that comes in the Tabaqat-e-Nashiri. Firoz Shah, Tariq-e-Firoz Shah, he is portraying the rulers as divinely sanctioned. Specifically, there are two writers with respect to Tariq-e-Firoz Shah, okay, two writers. And the second one, Afif, specifically, he tries to create a very ideal image for Firoz Shah Tughlaq. He says that he was a divine king, right? That information can be seen. Persianized kingship can be seen, right? So that's something which we find, that these people were trying to accept the culture of Persia, which they consider as very superior in nature. Like Balban is someone which is linked to this. So they emphasized on adab, insaf, even shariat, right? So those kinds of information can be find. Genealogical constructs are also there, like they're trying to trace the ancestry of their forefathers also, like the Timur as well as the Genghis Khan or the Genghis Khan. Court poetry can also be seen, like Amir Khusro was more of a court poet. He was someone who was trying to bring more and more content with respect to this, okay, more and more content with respect to this. They have also shaped the historical memory, but yes, broadly, the more focus is on victory, then the focus is on the defeat. That is something which we find here. So selective recording is there. Myth making is a big challenge which we see. Like Aine Akbari portrayed emperor as philosophical kings, right? Cultural assimilation with Indian tradition can also be seen. Preservation of knowledge, like recording governance and courtly culture, that can also be seen. Like the famous Fatwa-e-Jahandari. So this is a text which gives information with respect to polity, with respect to governance, and this is written by Barney, which says how governance should be done. So these sources also try to focus on political and administrative matters, like Tariq-e-Firoz Shah, Baburnama. They provide their ideology also, right? Their sovereignty is also mentioned. Intellectual syncretism can also be seen, like Amir Khusro blends Persian as well as Indian themes, okay, and that's why he also got the title of Tutiye-Hind, the parrot of India. Historical consciousness can also be found here. Some critics are going to stay there all the time. Like number one, elitist representation. Their major focus is on the elite. Their focus is not on the common people. So from subaltern history's perspective, this is the big limitation. Number two, exaggeration. Unnecessary level of exaggeration you will find, specifically when the texts have been written by people who are poets like Amir Khusro. Sometimes deliberate level of misrepresentation of facts can be seen. If you go for Barani has misrepresented many facts with respect to Muhammad bin Tughlaq so that he can please Firoz Shah Tughlaq, right? So that kinds of motivation can also be seen in the text. When your motivation is not correct, the information you will provide largely is going to be biased in nature. court-centered historiography is there, focus on imperial center, focus is on neglecting these regional dynamics. So those kinds of challenges we can find with respect to this, right? So this literature crafted political legitimacy and historical memory. It has shaped medieval India's cultural landscape. That is something which we can see here. Next, we can see the Bhakti literature, right? So Bhakti movement, all of you know, it has become very prominent, and there's a large time span from 6th century all the way up to the 17th century. We see the Bhakti movement. Bhakti movement begins from the area of Tamil, then it spreads to Karnataka, then it comes to Maharashtra, from Maharashtra to Gujarat region, then comes towards the north. So there is a specific upward trend which we see in the Bhakti, right? So initial Bhakti, it is linked to the Tamil Bhakti with the rise of Alvars and Nayanas during the time of the Pallavas. Slowly we see towards the Karnataka, the Bhasvana, the Lingayat movement becomes prominent. Then the movement which is linked to multiple Bhakti saints from the Maharashtra region, right? And finally we see towards the north. Ramananda played a very important role in bringing Bhakti from South India to North India. And later on we see the rise of multiple important personalities like the most important among them is Guru Nanak Ji, or if we talk about Kabir, or if we talk about the other prominent personalities, okay, even from the region of Bengal. So what was their role? What was the role of this Bhakti literature? So if we see the Bhakti literature, one thing is very clear, they were focusing on personal devotion. Like if you see Mirabai, right, so her focus was on personal devotion, and that's why they were trying to criticize ritualism. Kabir was completely against it, Bhasvana is also against it, right? They also critique the caste, not all of them, but many of them. They rejected the Brahminical supremacy like Ravidas. Gender inclusivity can also be seen like Akka Mahadevi, Mirabai. They show that the Bhakti trend was always, okay, diversified, and many voices were increased against the patriarchy also. Simplicity over Sanskrit can also be seen, right? Like use of multiple vernacular languages like Kabir can be seen linked to the Braj Bhasha. And that is something which is unique of those times. So lots of contribution can be seen of these Bhakti movement with respect to vernacular languages. Like number one, language standardization. Like if you see Marathi as a language owes a lot to these Bhakti movement saints, right? Without them, this would not have happened. The famous saints like Eknath, Tukaram, all of them, they composed in Marathi, okay? All of them. Then poetic forms like Doha, Abhangs, if you see the Dohas of Kabir, right, they are very prominent. Kirtan, which is linked to multiple personalities, right? Then popular literacy like oral recitation can be seen. Influence can also be seen, like we see they have shaped Avdi as well as the Marathi prose. So all those kinds of significance can be seen. Then one specific theme, what this has been their role in the promotion of religious harmony. So when we talk about religious harmony specifically, we have to understand they created the syncretic tradition, okay, the merger of the values of Hinduism as well as the Islam, and that has played a very important role. Number two, common themes of God's love, equality, rejection of caste, sectarianism, that was explored. That brought even more level of syncretic culture in general, or the composite culture. Literary contributions of Kabir, Mirabai, Tulsidas can be seen. Ramcharitmanas is one of the most important text, right? Social impact can also be seen with respect to this. Like if you see Guru Granth Sahib, in Guru Granth Sahib you will find many of the dohas coming from the Kabir. That composition is already there. Some critical perspective also you can see, like if you see overall the Bhakti movement, so limited elite challenges there, right? Limited elite challenges there. Then regional variations, impact was stronger in North as well as the West India. Sanskritization also was there, like later it diluted the overall radicalism of the saints. If you see Kabir, his philosophy, he believed in universal message, critique of rituals, nirguna, as we have discussed, nirguna, formless, okay, that was he believed in. Social equality, yes, and finally, also, he shaped multiple philosophies, okay. His writings can be found in Bijak, his dohas, and as we have discussed, his writings are also linked to Guru Granth Sahib. If we see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, okay, so he was a very influential person in Bengali, linked with the Kirtan also, right? And he was often considered as the incarnation of Vishnu, okay, incarnation of Vishnu. Then He promoted Nam Sankirtana, chanting divine names, emphasized Radha Krishna theology, Kirtan, and he was often seen as an avatar of Krishna. Socio-cultural impact is very significant overall of the Bhakti movement. So we see democratization of religion. Why? Because previously, if you see the Brahmanism, less access was there with respect to lower caste and women, and that was something which was radically changed during this period of time. They also challenged the ritual orthodoxy, right, which we have seen. They allowed their disciples to come from any background, any tradition, and that is something unique. We also see inspiration of devotional literature, music, and art in Bengali and Sanskrit. And finally, they're linked to the sacred sites like Puri, Vrindavan, as well as South India. Legacy has continued, like we see the founding of the Gaudiya Vaishnavism institutionalized by the sixth Goswamis, inspired by ISKCON and the other movements. All this has continued even till today. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has been a very influential personality with respect to the Bhakti movement and even till today. Now, what are the famous Chinese and the Arab travelers? This is a very easy topic. Okay, from the Chinese you can talk about Faiyan, Hunsang, as well as the Itzing. With respect to Arabs, we have multiple Arab travelers, right? So the famous one, Al Masudi, Al Sulaiman. Most important, most prominent is Al Biruni. So those are the prominent leaders which you can think about. What kind of information do they provide us? Let us try to see. So they provide us cultural observations, the observations of the custom, religion, language, and literature. So Faiyan Hunsang talks a lot about it. Economic insight, okay, what kind of trade, agriculture, and urban centers do we find? That is also there. Political structure, you can see, like information of kingship as well as administration, that information is there. Famous travelers like Hunsang, Al-Biruni, Ibn Battuta is also there, as well as Faiyan, right? So these are the major travelers that we have. They provide information about religion and social practices. Like if we see Al-Biruni, he is known as the father of Indology. He provides a lot of information about India's social customs. Many of them are not understood well by him, but at least he tried his level best. Geographical insight, sorry, that can also be found. Cultural exchange, like how Al-Masudi wrote about Indian science influencing the Islam thought. And military relations, okay, that can also be seen, like even the observation on Delhi Sultanate. So those kinds of information we can find here. And these people have given us a lot of perspective on India's culture, economy, religion, as well as governance. What is there? And then what do we see? The impact of literature and press during the colonial period on freedom struggle. So we have seen large number of press, large number of literature. Literature is linked to social reforms. Literature is linked to rise of nationalism. Literature is linked to promoting those kinds of ideas of criticism of the government. So all those things you can find with respect to the modern India. These are the broad dimensions that we have, like national awakening, press, as Bipan Chandra says, press was nothing. It was a kind of a social duty. It was a kind of a national duty. And press has played a very important role in creating the library movement, where people would, in the villages, they would sit and they talk and they discuss about the policies of the government, and that created the overall broader role for the education. Second, newspapers like Kesari, Amrita Bajar Patrika, they exposed the injustice during the colonial times. Literary works like Anand Math, Vande Mataram, they inspired patriotism. Okay, many of these texts also try to give us the broad understanding of the kind of exploitation of the British by the British, like Neil Darpan, all of you know about it. Writers like Tagore, Bharti, they also stirred nationalism. Vernacular press, the focus was on the regional pride. They faced large number of challenges. Large number of acts were brought by the British, starting from 1799. Okay, starting from 1799, time of Wellesley, we see the regulations of the act. Right, 1823 press regulations were there, and the most infamous vernacular press act of 1878 can also be seen, which suppressed the dissent. Then repression, like if we see Tilak went to jail for 8 years, right? If around 1908 for 6 years, right? 1908 he went to jail for that purpose. Then low literacy remained a big problem in creating the significant impact of these kinds of publications. So, but in spite of all this, what do we see? They helped in nurturing Indian nationalism in general. So these are the broader points which you can remember. Now, when it comes to architecture, again, with respect to architecture, we have start from the initial topic. The initial topic that we have is Indus Valley Civilization. 2014 UPSC asked this question: how did we have learned, or how how we can learn from the urban architecture of the Indus Valley civilization. So naturally our cities are a mess in general, okay, barring few. So that's why we can learn a lot from it. So when we talk about the architecture, we have to see the planning has been wonderful, right? So they go for the grid system. All of you know about the grid system, right? So the streets are wide, like Mohenjo-daro has 30-40 feet wide street, ensuring organized level of movement. Second, advanced drainage system, public health focus is there. So the connection of the drains indicates efficient urban sanitation. Water management is also there, right? If you see, water management is done pretty well. Dholavira is having large number of reservoirs. That also shows, right? Next, if we see uniform brick size 1:2:4. Okay, they used the what is known as the English bond style that was used by them. The Great Bath shows a certain level of maturity with respect to construction. So all these are the urban features which we see here with respect to it. Okay, there was specific kind of capacity for the watch and ward also, right? So all these are the features which we see with respect to urbanization. And urbanization is something which is very, very important because human societies, human civilization thrives on urbanization. And in today's times, we need to learn from this. So what can we learn in contemporary times? So we see the problem of unplanned sprawl in different parts of India, like Bengaluru, Delhi. 10 to 15% of at least Indian population is living in the slums without any kind of better infrastructure. Fragmented authorities, their civic authorities, they are fighting among themselves, and that leads to what is known as the biggest challenge in India's governance. Poor drainage, waste management is there. Traffic and pollution has become something which is very, very problematic in different parts of India. That's why we can learn a lot from Indus Valley civilization, right? How can we learn? Please remember, number one, create integrated sewerage networks, because sewer is something which is the biggest problem which we face in India, right? Modular construction standards are also required. Brick sizes, building modules, as we see in Harappa, as we see in Mohenjo-daro. Green blue infrastructure, like recently we have discussed, okay, a lot with respect to infrastructure, that how the roads should have a green belt. Similarly, there should be green blue infrastructure. Clear zoning with mixed use nodes, that should be there. Community stewardship, everybody should take a responsibility. It's not the responsibility of only the government to look after the cities. It's also all of us, all the citizens. So that kind of conviction is required. So when we can go for this level of understanding, okay, this level of understanding, then standardization, sanitation, water management, zoning, everything can be taken care of. And if we take care of all these kinds of things, then naturally the outcome is going to be very good. So all of you need to learn this, right? That art and architecture is one area where UPSC is going to target you in multiple dimensions. Some are going to be very factual, like Krishna Deva Raya, Ashtadiggaja, that's very factual in nature. Second, some applied kind of questions are going to come, like this is a very applied kind of a question. In these kind of question, you have to use your head, you have to use your broader point, because in the art and culture kinds of books, you will not find the answers to this. Here, application is going to be more important. Third, you will find third categories of questions also, which are going to be more challenging, where generation of points is going to become problematic, like what is the role of Palas in the promotion of Buddhism. You may have learned hardly few points about them and Buddhism, the intersection between them or the interaction between them. That is one area, right? Different kinds of questions you will have, and in every specific part of architecture, you have to learn the keywords. If keywords are missing, then marks will not come. Architecture requires keywords, painting requires keywords, even cave architecture requires keywords. Everywhere keywords are going to be required. So my advice is to all of you, please focus on the keywords. If keywords are strong in art and architecture, marks are going to be very high. Like this Krishna Deva Raya, I had crammed a few keywords in 2016. I scored around 126 marks in paper 1, which shows that if you do the things in the right manner, then you can get very good marks. Like I think, remember, rank 1 got I think 131 marks in 2016 and I had 126 marks. That was very high marks in that year, even when I was not able to attempt all the questions, because the kind of information that I was having in that year was something wonderful considering the paper. That's why all of you need to focus on the keywords. That's a very good strategy to score very high marks. If you follow this strategy, naturally you're going to continue to understand, right? What to do, what not to do. So do's and don'ts are very important along with the classes, because here the single-minded focus, okay, at PW is on creating results. And when we create result, it leads to lots of happiness for you, your family, your friends, and also in general for the PW family. And that is exactly what we are always looking for. Please keep on watching this video. This video is going to be very useful for your mains as well as in some cases for your prelims also. So thank you so much, and please continue learning. Learning is the most important part, okay, and we are trying to do it in the minimum possible time. This is more of a kind of a video where not just crash course, lots of advices are being given to become the topper, and bringing the topper out of you is something which we consider is our responsibility. Hi, so let us continue. Okay, so the next topic that we have with respect to architecture, again it's a little repetition of the topic we have already discussed. It's about Ashoka. Okay, so when we see about Ashoka, so we have certain categories of architecture with respect to him. First, as we have already discussed, it's about Ashoka pillars, right? So we find pillars from multiple parts of India, and he is one of the pioneer with respect to this. And through his pillars, he's spreading message of Dhamma as well as the imperial authority. And one of the most famous one, okay, as we see, multiple pillars were brought to Delhi, and they brought his inscriptions. The focus is on non-violence, moral governance, all that can be seen. With respect to value addition, you can remember his pillars. They have many similarity with the Iranian pillars. And the tradition of edicts, okay, was also there in Iran. So we often say that probably he learned from them. So you can just mention one point, that the influence of the Iranian pillars can be seen on the pillar architecture of Mauryas, and eventually he took it forward, right? Certain similarities are there, certain differences are there. So we can just remember few points with respect to that also. Then stupas, as we have already seen, that after the war of Kalinga, he had a change of heart. After the change of heart, what do we see? We see his conversion to Buddhism. And after conversion to Buddhism, eventually he became a promoter of these stupas. As per the tradition, 84,000 stupas were made by him. Okay, the most famous stupa, Sanchi stupa, was enlarged during his reign, and we see the addition of the gateways also. Okay, the gateways which are known as Toranas. Okay, the 4 gateways in the 4 directions with respect to stupa that can be seen at this point of time. Plus, he was someone who was trying to give a lot of patronage to Buddhism. Majority of the ideas which we see in Dhamma, the core of Dhamma is borrowed from Buddhism. So even if he was trying to promote Dhamma in his empire, one way or another, it was also leading to the promotion of Buddhism. Then we have these multiple edicts. We have discussed about the edicts also. Okay, edicts, as we discussed, they help us in understanding his administrative policies, his moral principles, and how in his 13th edict, he talks about the remorse that he has felt after the Kalinga war. Okay, so lots of such innovation can we find, right? We find different kinds of animal capital symbolism. So it's not just one. Like if you see at Rampurva, you'll find the bull capital. If you go to Sarnath, right? At Sarnath, you'll find the lion. And at Sankesha, we find the elephant. So at different places, we find different kinds of motifs, and these are very beautiful in nature, and they are power. They're the symbol of imperial power as well as the moral authority. We find multiple caves also, like many caves at Barabar and Nagarjuni. They were donated by him to various sects. The most important being the Ajivikas, the story that we know he and his grandson Dashrath, okay, his grandson Dashrath, they made these donations. Then large number of roadside rest houses and wells were created by him, because naturally he was trying to promote Dhamma. He wanted that all those people who are traveling, they should have some kind of support from the state. Okay, so that is exactly what we see. Plus, we see a certain level of standardization of architecture during his times, because from north all the way up to the south, same kind of pillars are found. The pillars are made at Chunar, right? So from Chunar, these pillars went to each and every part of the empire. And this is exactly what we need to remember, like pillars, stupas, rock edicts. All of this is reflect his dedication to dharma, religious unity, as well as regional integration. There are a large number of things which can be linked with Ashoka. Ashoka remains a very important topic. You can always write 2-3 points about him. Okay, and UPSC has been focusing a lot on Buddhism also. So whenever question comes on Buddhism, one point can be about Ashoka. So you can just remember these 4-5 points which are linked to him. If a specific question comes in, you can remember. One more piece of fact you can remember. When we see Mauryan architecture, okay, initially the Mauryan architecture was based upon wood. From wood, it eventually shifted to rock. So if a question comes with respect to the overall Mauryan Empire, so please write about that. Okay, like if we see some of the remnants which we have found from the places like Kumrahar, Bulandi Bagh, which belongs to the earlier phase of the Mauryan Empire, which are linked to the Chandragupta Maurya. So initial architecture is that of wood, and then we see a shift towards rock. So this evolution can be also one point. Okay, so this can be one point with respect to Mauryan architecture. Plus, we find Yaksha Yakshini, okay, from the region of Didarganj, which shows us popular art was also there. So if a question comes on overall Mauryan Empire, it can further improve your marks. Okay, so I'm just giving you 2-3 dimensions. 2-3 dimensions are more than enough to give you extra marks. This is what mains examination is all about. Okay, bringing in a better structure, bringing in certain kind of facts which are less known, and there itself you get major marks. Let us see further. Evolution of Buddhist architecture. So why did we see the evolution of Buddhist architecture in the post-Mauryan period? In the post-Mauryan period, we see the entry of these various dynasties, okay, like Indo-Greek, Sakas and Kushanas. It was easy for them to become part of the Indian society by following Buddhism. And that's why we see large number of diversification of the Buddhist architecture during this period. Even in the Deccan, we see the rise of Satavahanas. Satavahanas, even though they were Brahmins, right, but still they became responsible for giving patronage to Buddhism. That shows the tolerance which starts from the Maurya, it gets percolated even up to the Satavahanas. That also shows that in Indian culture, we have seen lots of continuity with respect to tolerance. Sometimes such kind of questions can also come. Okay, which this question has come in 15 marker. A tolerance has been part of the Indian culture since time immemorial. Elucidate with different examples. So there you can give these examples. These examples are very, very useful. So please see, in post-Mauryan period, we see the rise of stupas, viharas, as well as the rock-cut caves. That's exactly what you can see. Okay, so when we see stupas, all of you know that stupas, they starts from towards the end of the later Vedic, okay, or we often say post-Vedic also. And stupas literally means mounds. They became associated with Buddhism later on, okay, and they had Buddha's relics. Initially, when we see 9 stupas were built, okay, on the remains of the Buddha, okay, and the pot in which the relics were kept. With the period of time, we see a big tradition emerging. If we see architectural evolution, we see better carvings, beautiful designs, and the depiction of Jataka, tales, etc. See, initially Buddha was not represented, okay, by his images or by even the sculptures. The initial focus was on the various signs which were there. So various motifs were there to promote Buddhism. Like we see the motive of horse, okay, which was used for the purpose of renunciation, how he left the royal house. Similarly, we had the Dhamma Chakra Parivartana, that the spoke with the 24 specific parts. That is also used for the Buddhism. The lion was symbolic because of he was from the Sankha clan. So all those kinds of symbols were used initially. So you can also see that initially it was use of the symbols. Later on, we see his creation of various images, and that happens because of the rise of Mahayana Buddhism. Okay, Mahayana Buddhism. Kushanas are going to play a very important role in that, and which all of us know, right? Then stupas like Barhut, Amravati, they will spread across multiple parts in India. Okay, so in the Deccan also, in the Eastern India also, we see its rise. So stupas are going to become more beautiful, okay, by this time. And you can remember the various parts of the stupa also. And some of you who can draw, right, who can draw in the real time, you can learn also, because I've seen multiple talented people doing it in the exam hall also, right? Just labeling is something which you can learn, like the four specific dwars, they are known as toranas. Boundaries are known as Vedika. Okay, the circumambulation path, it is known as the Pradakshina path, where the people in general move. So this is Pradakshina path. In the middle we have Anda. Okay, at the top we have Harmika and Chhatra. It's a little less visible. Okay, if you have the NCRT, this is given pretty well. Okay, the fine arts NCRT, you can use it. The fine arts NCRT, good diagram is given. So you can make a diagram, okay, and you can show the different parts of stupa. I still remembered in 2016 UPSC asked question on this, how by the use of various motifs, etc., stupa art spread the ideals of Buddhism. I wrote a very good answer on that, and they gave me good marks. So I also drew a little bit of a rough sketch. So if you can, okay, since there's less time, you can skip for now, but in the long run, it's a good way of increasing at least 1 to 1.5 marks, because very few people are able to make such kinds of figures, and such kind of figures are going to become very useful when it comes to the examination. Then Chaityas and Viharas, right? So all of us know Chaityas plus Viharas. So Chaityas, they are the place of worship. Viharas are the place of residence. And here, what was the function of these viharas? They were used for the purpose, okay, for these monks. They supported the Buddhist practice, teachings, and we find large number of viharas, right? Nalanda and Vikrantashila Vihara later became renowned learning centers also. Then, and these two are the major universities, right? Nalanda having a very big footprint, 10,000 students and around even 2,000 teachers. They used to be there at Nalanda. Architectural features, okay, can also be seen, like if we see the famous one, Ajanta. Okay, Ajanta, please remember, Ajanta has two phases. The first one belongs to Satavahana or Hinayana Buddhism. Second one, it belongs to the, in general we say Guptas, but the major contribution comes from the Vakatakas. So that also includes large number of such monasteries. Okay, around 29 caves are there. All of them, they are devoted to Buddhism. They are devoted to Buddhism. Then there were centers for Buddhist art, okay, and it can be seen in the Ajanta caves paintings as well as the sculptures. If we see the rock cut caves, okay, there's large number of rock cut caves. In the Mauryan period, we had the Barabar and the Nagarjuni caves. Later on, we see the specific focus on Chaitya as well as Vihara. Like when we talk about Chaitya, one cave is specifically very famous, and you can always remember its name. It is Karle. Karle has one of the biggest Chaitya hall in India, okay, and that's something which is very, very beautiful. And this has showcased advanced level of rock cut architecture. And if we see Ajanta, Ajanta is famous because if we see the paintings, it's hard to see that these paintings are still so fresh, right? So fresco paintings were created. It's so hard to make them. It's not that easy. If we see the spread of Buddhism, so within India, this kind of architecture became famous. Kanheri, Ellora, all these are the most prominent one, right? Ellora specifically is going to be more prominent during the Gupta period, and Rashtrakutas are going to be the major developers of the area of Ellora. We see fusion of architectural style also, like Vishwakarma, Elephanta, all of these are going to become prominent. Okay, so in general, post-Mauryan period, why do we see such superlative growth? The reason is very clear. These people were trying to become part of the Indian society, Indo-Greek, Shakas and Kushanas. Kushanas, they played a very important role with respect to sculpture. Okay, the cave tradition became very prominent under the Satavahanas. So that's how Buddhism, in a way, it reached a new level by the post-Mauryan period. Okay, post-Mauryan period. And even the four Buddhist councils played a very important role in creating a certainty with respect to the overall ideas, with respect to the basic postulates of Buddhism. And by the time of Kanishka, it became very prominent. So by the post-Mauryan period, all these basic things were already done. That's why Buddhism was bound to become so successful by this time. One more important religion that we have, it is Jainism. Now, Jainism has also played a very important role, okay, in the overall cultural contribution to Indian civilization. So Jainism has also been like linked to rock-cut caves, prominent temples that we see like at Mount Abu, statues, the famous statues we have from the southern part of India, and reflecting Jain values like non-violence as well as spiritual discipline. And when we talk about early rock-cut architecture, the best specimen comes from Udyagiri and Khandagiri. These are linked to one of the most prominent king, King Kharavala. Okay, and in this cave, there is an inscription. Okay, Hathigumpa inscription. In this inscription, he provides information about his role as a saint as well as a king. So he has listed his own achievements, okay, and what he has done for the Jainism, that we find in this Hathigumpa inscription. Some of these Barabar hills also were used by the Jainas, but as such, you can skip this example, okay, you can skip this example. Now, during the second phase, early medieval period, or just before that, we find multiple Jain temples, okay. Chalukyas gave patronage to them at Aihole as well as Badami. In fact, at Badami, we find multiple temples linked to Jainism. Rashtrakutas, they are also linked to Alloras, right? And at Ellora, if we see Amog Varsha was the person who was specifically linked to it. We have 34 caves, okay? Cave number 30 to 34 at Ellora are specifically linked to Jainism. And Amog Varsha, the king of the Rashtrakutas, played a very important role in that. Similarly goes for the Pallavas also. Okay, Pallavas had also supported rock-cut Jain site in Tamil Nadu, and one of the famous site we have is Sitanavasal. So Sitanavasal has Jain paintings, okay, and that's a very unique one. During the initial phase of the Pallavas, we see the follower of Jainism. Like if we see Mahendravarman first, so initially he was a follower of Jainism, but then eventually he shifted his patronage. And the temples, they began shifting from austerity to a more structured space, and the focus was now on decorative doorways as well as Tirthankar images also. That's also something which we see from this time onwards. Now, the high point of Jain temple architecture can be seen broadly in the later phase of early medieval period, which includes one of the most important Dilwara temples at Mount Abu. Okay, they're made in white marbles and intricate carving. In fact, many people say this specific structure played a very important role, and it has influenced Taj Mahal by showing how white marble can be used in such a magnificent manner. Naturally, the Taj Mahal reached a certain new level, but at least the use of the white marble can be easily seen, right? Then we have Gomteshwar statue at Shevan Belugola, which is again a very monumental size Jain art. It is very unique. Right? And we find temples at Palitana and Girnar hills and they have become very prominent pilgrimage site, right? With features like domed mandapas, hilltop location. They also symbolize the spiritual ascent. In fact, we have Ranakpur Jain temples also, and they are also very beautiful. So, Jainism has played a very important role in India's civilizational history, and they have given us a lot of good architecture, and we need to be aware about it. Okay, what kind of values do we see which are promoted by Jainism through its architecture? So, if you see the initial ones, we see emphasis on simplicity, serenity, and even non-violence. And more importantly, there's a complete avoidance of violent imagery. Plus, Tirthankars, they are shown in meditation postures, reinforcing the overall spiritual discipline or the spiritual introspection. Large number of communities have played a very important role in giving the patronage for the creation of large number of these architectural structures. Communities like Oswal, Marwadi, they have funded these temples through endowment as well as land grants. So, when we see these caves, when we see all these structures, you have to always remember it's not just about the king, it's also about the others. And that's exactly what we can see here. Right? So, if we have to go for a conclusion, we can specifically say that Jain architecture balanced simplicity and grandeur, which reflected Jain values while incorporating regional styles and royal patronage. The next one is Gupta period. Okay, so if we see Gupta period, it's very important. Temple architecture can come at any point of time. The comparison of the Nagara and the Dravidian style of temple architecture can also come. So this next 15-20 minutes, we're now going to have focus specifically on how we see the evolution of the temple architecture and the specific features of Nagara as well as the Dravidian style of temple architecture. Now, when we see Gupta period, right, broadly 320 to 550, this is known as the golden age of Indian culture as well as the architecture, right? The first major contribution of them is known as the Panchayatan style. This Panchayatan style has the structure like this. Here we have a central shrine, and then we have 4 subsidiary shrines. This is what is known as Panchayatan. Okay, this is what is known as Panchayatan. So such kind of basic architecture structures you can make in the exam also to make it very clear. Like this question was asked in prelims also in 2014. What do you understand by Panchayatan, right? So here the main shrine is surrounded by smaller shrine at 4 corners. Now the best example of this is the Dashavatar temple at Devgarh, which is linked to Vishnu. Okay, and this symbolizes cosmic order. Okay, the way the universe has been, that cosmic order gets symbolized here. Then we see the development of Shikhar. Okay, development of Shikhar. The emergence of Shikhar can be seen like the curvilinear kind of Shikhar is going to emerge slowly. Shikhar development will not happen all of a sudden. Okay, and in the Shavatar temple, okay, at Devgarh, we find one of the earliest form of Shikhar, okay, evolving from large spires in the later temple. So slowly it's going to increase, right? Sculptures, if you see, sculptures also will find different types of sculptures. Hindu mythology, we find lots of stories from Ramayana, Mahabharata are being utilized for creating sculptures. That information you will find here, right? You'll also find minor deities on the for the purpose of sculpture. Yaksha, Yakshani, Nagas, right? Those kinds of things you'll find here. And the display, like in this specific temple, we see the incarnations of Vishnu, which is broadly what the Dashavatar is all about, right? The 10 avatars of Vishnu. Then we see Chandragupta first and Samudragupta. They gave a lot of patronage to Hinduism. We had this famous temple also, Bhitargaon. This is famous because this is a brick temple. So we see lots of experimentation with the material. We see experimentation with the style. These are the early times. the Nagara style of temple architecture was still finding its feet, and this is the first dynasty which was now becoming prominent for the temple architecture. After this, it will only see the rise, we'll only see the better evolution of the temple architecture from this time onwards. So if we see a conclusion on the Gupta period, so we can say that this saw the evolution with respect to Panchatan style, Shikhar, okay, along with rich sculptural art, royal patronage, and it further shaped the future temple architecture. I'm omitting this Viman because Viman word is more pronounced with respect to South India. So for the removal of ambiguities, we should be very clear about it, because sometimes this word can be used. It's not something that it is a criminal offense, right? But the problem is when we use it too freely, someone may deduct our marks. So that's why I'm ensuring, because even if it has been used by the content team, it can be avoided. Okay, so that's why in this PDF I'm cutting it wherever it is coming. In fact, you'll see in the future they themselves have made the distinction, but somehow this small errors often creep in this art and architecture, because lots of ambiguity is there in the content which is available online. That's why you can just use the standard information for the sake of answer writing. Okay, for the sake of answer writing. Now let us see what kind of influence the Gupta architecture had on later Indian temple styles, right? So if we see, the Gupta period saw the beginning of Nagara style of temple architecture, and slowly we find different kinds of ideas becoming a part of it. Like we see introduction of square sanctum. Okay, the square sanctum or the Garbhagriha with the flat or pyramidic like roof became standard in Gupta temple, and we find this temple at Sanchi. Okay, it's a simple square plan with pillared porch, prototype for the North Indian temples. In fact, even in Odisha, we can find some temples like early Nagara style. Okay, the Parshurameshwar temple at Bhubaneswar, it reflects the Gupta influence. Then we see the rise of the Shikhar also. Okay, slowly the Shikhar is going to rise. The curvilinear, okay, because it will be straight and sudden, and then we'll see the shift, right? So that is what this curvilinear Shikhar is all about. You can always see that till the base it is straight, and then we see the curvilinear shape. So this curvilinear, this the way it will be, this will become curvilinear Shikhar. And different forms of Shikhar will be formed specifically in the style of the Odisha style of temple architecture. So you can make these small figures which can help us in understanding the different forms of architecture. Like the Shavatar, this is the earliest Shikhar that we have. Later on we'll see better improvement. Like we have find it Khajuraho as well as Modera. That also shows the influence. Okay, that also shows the influence. If we see the overall art, it has graceful proportions, number one, divine symbolism and narrative reliefs. These are some of the points which you can remember, and they can be written anywhere. In fact, it's just like the fillers, right? Mythological panels, like I've told you, Ganga, Yamuna. Just like in south, we have the concept of Dwarpala. In north, we see sculptures of Ganga and Yamuna you will find just before the enters into the Garbhagriha. So we find such kinds of panels, okay, which in fact even influenced the Chalukyan and the Chola sculptures in the southern part of India. Then spread to other regions includes like Vakatakas and Chalukyas. They adopted the Gupta sculpture principles in the Deccan region. Badami, Paddakal, Ehol, they also reflect the Gupta influence in plasters, in mandapas as well as figure sculptures. Okay, so in a way, if this question is asked, how did Gupta architecture influence other forms of temple architecture in India or other forms of sculpture in India? So please, you can write all these points, and these points can help you fetch very good marks. Okay, can help you fetch very good marks. Now we see large number of regional styles of temple architecture, specifically in Deccan as well as South India. So here we find the multiple style of temple architecture. If we see Dravidian has multiple features. Like one thing which stands out is the use of Gopuram. So in southern India, gateways, the entries, okay, the entry gate is massive in nature. We have the temple towers. The word which we use for that is Viman. Viman is a bit different from the Shikhar. Reason being, here we find pyramidal roof. Here we find pyramidical roof. Okay, we have the mandapas also, the pillared halls where the devotees often wait before they get their turn for the worship. The Deshwar temple at Tanjore, it is having one of the best Viman. Okay, which is one of the best Viman, and it belongs to the reign of Raja Chola. Raja Chola. Okay, having one of the best Viman that we see in India. Then, with respect to iconography, we find different kinds of sculptures. The iconography with respect to this, Dwarapala is very important. Dwarapala is very important. The same kind of style, okay, can be seen at Meenakshi temple also at Madurai, which depicts the divine marriage of Meenakshi and Sundareshwarar. That's something which we find here. Alright, that is also very important. So please remember, Cholas, they took the lead in creating new kinds of ideas. This was taken to the next level by Vijayanagar. Like certain new features were added, like we'll see in the PPT also, like Rai Gopurams, okay, and the concept of Amma Shrine. We'll see the introduction of circular architecture also, like Lotus Mahal, elephant stable. So, circular architecture is something which is unique, which finds its place during the Vijayanagar Empire. Vijayanagar Empire is famous for ultra level of gopurams known as Rai Gopuram. The concept of Amma Shrine becomes famous. Okay, Charji horses or Yali thumbs, it becomes very, very prominent. Okay, this is taken to the next level by the Nayaka styles. So Nayakas, they were broadly the feudal class which was linked to the Vijayanagar. At the very basic level, we can say that. And it is the Nayaka style which we can find at Meenakshi temple. Now the highest level of ornamentation can be seen here. The features of the Vijayanagar Empire with higher level of ornamentation. That is exactly what we can see here. Okay. The Chola started with something basic. Okay, at the beginning of use of Gopuram, use of Viman, sculptures of Dwarapala, panels of stories from mythology. So all those things could be seen in the later part also, but at a grander scale. So I would advise all of you to please remember certain things, right? Like the Vijayanagar style is given a specific name also known as Pravida style. Such kinds of keywords can become very useful in prelims also as well as mains as well. So always try to remember these specific things. When you remember the specific things, it improves the number of marks that you will get. Now we have to see the role of temples in society as well as politics. Look, in South India, temples played a very important role. Okay, temples were those institutions which were a point of centralization also. Temples also helped in setting up the cultural values also. Temples worked also as economic institutions. So it was a diverse work of the temples in the case of South India. Some of the famous temple as we have seen like Brideshwar temple, Virupaksha temple, these are very important. So we can see they acted like a social hub, right? They served as cultural center. They gave a lot of encouragement to art, education, and even community activities. Whenever the fairs and the festivals they were organized, naturally at that point of time, it behaved like a big employer, and it was an employer which was encouraging culture, encouraging art, education also, right? Like there used to be these institutions known as Gatikas, and they were linked to temples. So through them, it helped in the spread of education. Political patronage like Cholas and Vijayanagar, they gave patronage to temples, reinforced their power and religious legitimacy. In fact, just try to see this. When Rajendra Chola, he won in the battle against the Palas, he came out with this title of Gangaikonda Chola. And then the temple was also built. Okay, he established a new city, he established a new capital, and here eventually he built the temple, which is again on the base same just like that of Brideshwara temple. So exactly what we can see that there is a very big linkage between the power and religious legitimacy. Okay, and the one of the best is Virupaksha temple that we have at Hampi. It reflects that these Vijayanagar rulers they were having a role, okay, with respect to the protection of Hinduism. So it was more of like dharma. Okay, it was the important dharma for them. Then we see the development of Vesra style also in the Deccan. Okay, when it comes to Vesra style, it's a mixture of the Nagara style of North India plus Dravidian style of South India. Its specific examples can be seen under Chalukyas, then Rashtrakutas, eventually under Hoysalas. So, large number of such things, okay, large number of such evolution can be found in multiple dynasties. This evolution can be found in the multiple dynasties. Alright, so Vesra style of temple architecture can be seen from the most famous temple, okay, it is the Kailashnath temple. Kailashnath temple, as we have seen, it is cave number 16. It's a monolith made out of a single rock. It started during the reign of the ruler Krishna I. According to certain estimate, it took around 100 years. 100 years were taken for the creation of this. And since it was such a delicate piece of artwork, it did require those kind of work because the temple construction started from the top. It was a hard rock. They had to cut out the rock in multiple parts so that they can create the temple. You should always look at the picture of this, okay? Kailashnath temple at Ellora. Then the Vesra style facilitated regional adaptation of architectural norms, also integrating diverse culture in the Deccan. These temples, again, as we've just seen, they helped in the growth of religious practices. They also became prominent for the rituals, like we have Sri Shailam temple, which became a pilgrimage destination for Vishnu as well as Shiva devotees. They're also a monumental piece of architecture, and they also promote the ritual, like Chidambaram temple. Okay, includes a large hall for Nataraja's dance. So large number of fairs, festivals, they can be linked to them. So both these styles, Dravidian and Vesra, laid the foundation for regional temple architecture, and it has helped in shaping the culture as well as the society. So all of those things you can see they can be linked. Then when we see Dravidian temple architecture, we broadly go towards Pallava and the Cholas. Let us now try to understand what is their contribution, and we will see with respect to this. Okay, so Pallava, if we see the early development, okay, they initiated Dravidian architecture with rock cut and structural temple. One of the earliest example is Shore Temple at Mahabalipuram. It is one of the earliest examples, Shore Temple at Mahabalipuram. It's a big temple complex that we have, right? Large number of innovations were done. So they introduced the Viman, the temple tower, in simpler form, setting the foundation for future developments. If we see their achievements, we also find the Ratha temples, okay, which are dedicated to multiple personalities. Cholas are the one who really took this to the next level, and this is where we see Dravidian architecture started going towards its peak, at least during the early medieval period, till the time of the rise of Vijayanagara. So we do find large temples like Brideshwara. Brideshwara becomes a model. Okay, we have a massive Viman, we have intricate sculptures, and a central dome is there. Grand gopurams were made. Okay, the gateways got linked to the prestige of the king. Okay, prestige and power of king. That's why, in general, if we see the concept in North India, the biggest tower, it should be the one in which we have the god, right? The Shikhar is often the most tallest tower that we have, because just immediately below it we have the Garbhagriha. But in South India, we see a shift of the tradition, and the shift of tradition can be seen very beautifully here, where the Gopurams now became the tallest towers in comparison to even the Garbhagriha. So even the Viman were on the lower side if we compare the height. Okay, so what are the major features? So they featured, have developed Viman, a conical stepped structure symbolizing the divine can be seen. We find large number of sculptures also which depict gods, mythological scene. Aravateshwar temple that we have at Darasuram, that is a very good example of this. Okay, that's a very good example of this. Then we see their contribution to Indian heritage. They have become centers for worship, art, education, as well as administration. In fact, Cholas were responsible for spreading Indian culture outside. All of you know that they were having a blue water navy. They were having a strong navy. They were able to capture Sri Lanka. They were able to capture Maldives. They were able to even have influence in Southeast Asia. Srivijaya kingdom was directly linked to them. In fact, one of the largest temple that we have, we find this Angkor Wat temple, okay, and Cambodia, Indonesia, Thailand. We find that there we see the spread of the Indian culture. That's why Pallavas and Chola period, they mark the beginning of the Dravidian style of temple architecture, and more importantly, they influenced the designs not only in South India but also the beyond. And in beyond, we have to always remember about Southeast Asia, as well as we can remember about the Indochina, specifically the area of Cambodia. One of the biggest temple in the world, Angkor Wat, it is from there. Now, the two style of temple architecture are there. I hope this is the easiest part, right? We can always remember, like if we see Nagara style of temple architecture, can you see the shikhar here, right? So it's curvilinear. To a certain extent, it is straight, and then we see the entry into the middle. So that is the, but we see beehive shaped शिखर, है ना, मधुमक्खी का छत्ता जैसा होता है, उस तरीके से आप उसको देख सकते हो. And at the top, what do we find? We find a disc known as amlaka, and we have the pot which is known as kalash. That is something which we find in the north, right? If we go towards Dravidian temple, they have pyramidical roof which is known as Viman. So it goes on in steps. Okay, so it goes on in steps. So it's not like that. It's going to be, so pyramidical roof is going to be there. Stepwise going to be there. It looks very beautiful, and this was a variation which we find in South India. While in the north, it was more of the curvilinear or the beehive shaped. Okay, you can use either of the word. It's always better to use the technical words. If you'll just write only from the perspective of the one, it's not going to be good enough. You're just writing shikhar is not good enough. Second, if you see a temple layout in Nagara, a linear layout, Garbhagriha, Antral, Mandapa you will find. In Dravidian, more complex plan is there, right? We find concentric enclosures known as Prakar as well as towering gopurams are also there, right? Then, with respect to ornamentation, Nagara, we see sculpture details on the outer walls. In Dravidian, we see use of icon, niches, bronze carving inside the mandapa. In North, what do we find? We find mythological stories on Shikhara as well as the wall. In South, as we all of us know, the concept of Dwarpala is very important, the door guardians. With respect to dynasty support, in North it starts with Guptas and then large number of dynasty, they give patronage to this, right? Like the Eastern Gangas, Chandelas, Parmars, Pratiharas, all of them, they will give patronage to this. In Dravidian, it starts with Pallavas. Cholas plays a very important role. In deeper south, we'll find Pandyas also. So all of them, they will play a very important role in the overall patronage as well as the cultural reflections. If you see the cultural ethos, so in North, cosmic symbolism, pan-India deities can be found a lot. In Dravidian, we find like religious, social and economic centers are there. They reflect Bhakti and the Shiva traditions. If you see regional variations, in North you will find Odisha style, okay, having the Lingaraja temple, Khajuraho, very famous, okay, for its erotic sculptures also. Towards the west, we have Solanki or Madu Gujra style, which includes one of the most beautiful temple, Modhera Sun Temple. In the south, you may find the famous Shore Temple at Mahabalipuram linked to Pallavas. Cholas have this Gangaikonda Cholapura, which I've just told you. Vijayanagar has the Virupaksha temple. So all of these are the prominent examples. All of these are the prominent examples that we have. Now the same can now be written in the tubular form also. Okay, the tubular form also. So please see period of development. For the first time, Nagara appears in the 5th century, and the Guptas and Dravida under the Pallavas around the 7th century. If you see the main tower, here the shikhar is curvilinear or what we call beehive. In the south, we find pyramidal roofed, okay, known as Viman. Platform, yes, they're built on a raised platform, okay. They're not made directly on the earth. A raised platform is there. That is why it is important to write. In south, no, they're not built on raised platform. That's why we call them freestanding temples. We call them freestanding temples. All right. Then, if you see the concept of boundary wall, it is generally absent in North India. It means generally. There are certain exceptions. One of the most important exception for this is the schools of Odisha. In Odisha style of architecture, okay, you will find boundary walls, which is in general absent in the rest. In South, it's a common feature. It is enclosed within a compound walls, right? Because since the temple architecture is so grand, large number of structures are there, so we need a horizontal kind of a boundary to that, and that's why we find the compound wall. Entrance gateway, either they are very simple or in general they are absent also, okay. But in south, all of you know, gopurams become very important. In fact, later on we have Rai gopurams, which can be found in the Vijayanagar Empire. So, Gopuram being linked to power and prestige of the king, naturally they become very important. Next, if you see sanctum location, so yes, it's under the tallest shikhar, naturally, right? The Garbhagriha. Here, the main shrine may have a smaller Viman. As I've told you, Gopuram can have higher height than the Viman in that case. And if you see temple tank, it is usually outside the complex. Here also, since it is usually, it has certain exceptions, like this famous Sun Temple at Modhera. This is having a tank within its premises. Okay, so that's the exception that we have. Here in general, you will find temple tank inside the complex. So all these are the basic features which you can utilize for division of this overall temple architecture from north as well as south. 5 to 6 points more than enough. Okay, 5 to 6 points more than enough. So let us see the conclusion. In conclusion, you can find like both Nagara and Dravidian style, showcase India's regional diversity and spiritual imagination. They were together enriching India's sacred architectural heritage. That is exactly what you can write, right? There can be a very, very basic level question. Okay, what are the difference between Nagara and Dravidian style of temple architecture? Elaborate with examples. So when we say with examples, please remember at least 5 to 7 examples from North India, 5 to 7 examples from South India. Because if you will not remember the examples, you will not be able to bring out the differences, you will not be able to bring out the main features of the temple architecture. So from North India, at least remember 2-3 examples from the Gupta period. Same goes for the rest of the dynasties also. Same goes for South India also. So please try to remember the examples. Whenever it comes to architecture, specifically temple, you can bring the major outcome only by quoting the examples, because in most of the cases the technical detail is not going to be that much sharp. So that's why it's better to have at least the examples to safeguard you from not going in the wrong direction. Okay, so temples, please remember their examples. Now let us quickly see the phases of the Pallava style of temple architecture. So when we see Pallava style of architecture, there are certain rulers who have contributed to this. Okay, at the first major style, it is known as Mahindra style or Mahindra Varman first. So under him, they started cutting temples into natural rock surfaces, and these are nothing but these are the simple halls supported by pillars with lion bases. The major example of this is the Mandaka Patu cave that we have, where only stone was used with no bricks, wood, or even the metal. In the second phase, it is linked to Mamalla style. In the Mamalla style, okay, we see the temples becomes more creative. Pancharatha there, right? And the Mahabalipuram, it showcases unique monolithic shrines. All right. Then we have the third phase, the Rajasimha style. This is from where we actually see the major ones, right? And here we see the beginning of Shore temple. So please remember, in the Pallavas, the third stage is very important, and Rajasimha was responsible for the beginning of Dravidian architecture. This can also be written in the introduction. This can get you at least half a marks extra. If you can write specifically the ruler during whose reign we see the beginning of the Dravidian style of temple architecture, naturally your answer is going to be different from the others. And here it's always about writing those facts which make sense. So here please write about Narasimha Varman second, or you can write about the Rajasimha. Okay, it is one of the earliest stone built temples that we have, and this is from where we see the beginning of Dravidian style of temple architecture specifically. Then transitional styles, like if you see the last ruler, Danti Varman or Nandi Varman, in general, they introduced features like Pradakshina path, right, or circumambulation path, Gopuram beginnings. Okay, so initial, it is of the very initial level. Massive Gopuram are going to emerge only during the later times. Temples had larger enclosures and dynamic divine iconography that can also be seen here. Like we have this Mukteshwar temple, okay, Patangeshwar temple, all of which are more or less around Kanchipuram. So these are some of the examples. Suppose if question comes directly with respect to Pallavas, what is the contribution of Pallavas to India's culture? 4 phases you can write. If you write these 4 phases, naturally you will get very high marks. When question comes on culture, add other dimensions also, like paintings also you can add literature also, other aspects you can write. If the question is specifically with respect to temple architecture, naturally only the 4 phases are good enough, and 10 marks, that is what you are supposed to cover, right? That is what you are supposed to cover in this case. Let us move further, okay? And then after this, we see the rise of Cholas, as we already discussed, Brideshwar temple, okay, Gangaikonda Cholapuram, all of that are prominent temples, okay, the prominent part. And the Cholas, it's the beginning of the next level of architecture. Then, if you see in North India, we have the Pala dynasty. This Pala dynasty is famous for the spread of Buddhist architecture, okay. They played a very important role in this spread also to Tibet, all the way up to Southeast Asia. All those areas can be seen during this time. So if we see what's linked to them, so please see Nalanda Mahavira, right? Even though it started during the time of the Guptas, it was extended by the Palas. It became a major Buddhist learning center with temples, right? And around 200 villages revenue was earmarked for only one purpose, for providing the sufficient support to this university. Jagadela monastery is also very famous, right? It is linked to Dharmapala. Around 10th century we see its rise. It has many temples, stupas, which again shows the religious patronage. Then they are also known for stone and brick construction. Vikramshila monastery, this was built using stone and brick with fine craftsmanship. Sculptures also we find, right, large number of sculptures of Buddha, Bodhisattvas, etc. can be found here with certain level of refinement. They also went for stupa construction, like if we see the example, Nalanda stupa is a prominent one. Okay, they had a significant influence on Buddhist architecture in India and beyond. The architecture influenced Bengal, Assam, even Southeast Asia. The Bayon temple in Cambodia reflects the influence of Palas. Iconography also, like their style influenced Bengal, Nepal. In all these areas, we find their outcome. This is the question which was asked by UPSC in, I think, 2020, right? So 2020, this is where this question was asked. What was the role of Palas in the spread of Buddhism? So you can always remember, they gave patronage to these institutions like Nalanda and Vikramshila. Second, they constructed monasteries also. They built monasteries, stupas. They spread Buddhism across North India and beyond. In fact, one of the most important part with respect to them is Tibet and China. They promoted Tantric Buddhism. Tantric Buddhism was more or less linked to Vikramshila. And as a result of this, it also went towards Tibet and China. In fact, large number of students, they used to come from other countries. Since Nalanda has a very large capacity, around 10,000 students, they could study at the same time. And as we have seen, okay, around 2,000 teachers were there. So that shows, okay, 1:5 student teacher ratio can be seen, which is fabulous for those times. Cultural exchange also happened through trade. They facilitated Buddhism spread to Southeast Asia. Promotion of art and literature can also be seen, okay. And finally, in a way, Buddhism became more of a unifying force. So till the time Pala's dynasty was in power, Buddhism remained prominent. After their decline, we also see the decline of Buddhism in India, and the Turkish invasion specifically played a very important role in their decline. But anyway, in this question, we don't have to write specifically about that, because the question is talking about how they have helped in the promotion of Buddhism. So the Pala dynasty's contribution is significant in Eastern India, and that's what you need to remember. Now, when we talk about early medieval, okay, so we also find some other forms of prominent architecture, like in Tamil, we have already seen Dravidian. In Karnataka, specifically, Hoysalas are very important. Hoysalas are known for what is known as star-shaped temples and use of soapstone. Okay, so very prominent dynasty. They have this stylate plan or star-shaped temples. They use the soapstone. So because of this, the kind of detail they are able to bring in sculpture is something unique. Okay, details in the sculptures is unique for this dynasty. You can remember 4 or 5 points. You can remember the example also. Okay, like we have Chinakeshwar temple, which is linked, okay, and the Hoysaleshwar temple. The places from where we find their temples includes Belur. Belur was the early capital, and then we have Helbidu, also known as Dwar Samudra. So known as Dwar Samudra. Alright, we have already seen in North India we have curvilinear Shikara. Okay, we have this cruciform plan also, Garbhagriha Mandapa. In Kalinga we find vertical elevation, wrist sculptures, Lingaraja, Sun Temple of Konark. They are having their own existence, have own level of beauty also. Khajuraho, as all of us understand, is very famous for this temple of Kandriya Mahadev, and it is having sculptures, tantric influence, all those things can be found here. In West, we had Maru Gujra style. One of the most famous is the Modhera temple that we have, okay. Along with that, the Jain temples at Dilwara, they're also very famous. Eastern India, we have a home dynasty coming later on, becoming famous for hemispherical domes, like Shiv Shagar, Shiv Dol is there, okay. And in Bengal, Vishnupur temples are famous. They are temple made of terracotta, something unique. Okay, something unique is there. That is something which we find here. Central India, we have Kakatiya. In Kakatiya again, since it's in the Deccan, it's in the transitional level of area. So we find a merger of Nagara Dravidian style of temple architecture. But the most famous architecture from here is the Ramappa temple, okay, which is today a UNESCO World Heritage Site, probably one of the only temple which is linked after the name of the architect. There's that differentiation, okay, and plus this is also known as, okay, floating temple. Okay, the kind of structure which is there, okay, it's also known as floating temple. Regional adaptations and innovations can be found everywhere, right? If you see overall, like the material used in Tamil Nadu, we see use of granite, soapstone, as I've told you, in Karnataka, sandstone in central India, iconography, use of Vaishnavism, Shaivism in south, Jainism in west, and Tantric in the east. Pilgrimage towns, large number developed in every part of India, Kanchipuram, Madurai, as well as Bhubaneswar. Craftsmanship, specialized artisans are there, right? And so post 11th century, they reflect a lot of regional diversity while maintaining a spiritual connection throughout the India. That's something which we can see. Right, so that's about ancient India. All the major topics which were there, possibly they have been covered. One or two areas which again had temple architecture, and you can write about them, is Kashmir. In Kashmir, we specifically have the Karkota dynasty. They are responsible for 2-3 prominent temples, which you can easily remember, like the Martan Sun temple is there. Pandarethan temple is also built. Use of wood is a significant feature of the region of Kashmir. Reason being, because of the stability purpose, they often use the wood architecture. Okay, that is something which we, and in that area we find a lot of influence even from the north, even from the south. So there's an influence of China, there's an influence of even from the side of the Greeks, there's an influence even with respect to the Guptas. So it's a very unique kind of architecture that we see in the Kashmir region. So Kashmir region in the early medieval has temple architecture. From the later times we see the beginning of the Islamic architecture. Now let us quickly see the Islamic architecture also. So Islamic architecture starts with Delhi Sultanate. All of us are aware about it. Okay, starts, 5 dynasties are there, and all of them, they have given their specific kinds of input to that. Now when we see innovations, large number of innovations are there, but innovations will come slowly, because initially they were using all the major craftsmen from India. They were using the material also from the temples. Like we have this Quatul Islam Mosque, which has used the material from the near around temples, in Hindus as well as the Jain temples. So we do not see any major distinct form, but slowly we'll find new kinds of ideas becoming a part of this. Like we see the use of true arch. They are introduced this Vosor arch for strength as well as aesthetics. And when we talk about true arch, we find its use in Balban's tomb. Example are very important, as I'm telling you. Okay, so first use is in the Balban's tomb. In Alai Darwaja, first structure with a true dome, right? Because in this Islamic architecture, we see use of arches, domes, and minarets. These are the 3 things which will become prominent. Okay, and this architecture is known as arcuate style. The previous Hindu architecture, it used columns and beams, and it is known as tribute style. Okay, so there's a significant change from tribute style to arcuate style when we shift from ancient to medieval India. And the arches, domes, and minarets, they become very, very important. That's why we are trying to remember this. Okay, the first true arch can be seen in the Balban's tomb. Alai Darwaja is known for the first true dome. Then we see the use of squinches also. Okay, so they're required to support circular dome that we have on a square base. That's why it is important. We have the famous minarets also, like one of the most important minarets is the Qutub Minar. Okay, and this is the Qutub Minar, which was dedicated to Bakhtiyar Kaki, started by Qutubuddin Aibak. Then multiple sultans have played a very important role in finishing it, renovating it. Multiple people are responsible. Like we have Iltutmish for finishing it, Firoz Shah Tughlaq is there, right? even Sikandar Lodi. Multiple people have been responsible for this Qutub Minar. Then we find use of spolia as well as the Indian craftsmanship during the initial time. Right? Spolia means the use of the stones, the use of the material from the Indian temples itself. Like Quwaitul Islam used Hindu pillars with Islamic motifs. Local artisans were utilized during the initial stage. So many Indian motifs become part of the Islamic architecture unconsciously. Initially, we see use of Islamic calligraphy and Indian floral carvings like Alai Darwaja uses them to a large scale. Then we see different kinds of monuments are now being utilized. Forts are going to become famous. Tughlaqabad fort is famous with thick walls and bastions. In fact, these forts, they have the effect which is known as battering effect. Okay, so we find battering effect in the Tughlaq architecture, which specifically has these sloping walls. They look very, very dominant. Okay, they are known as sloping walls. Then many cities were planned like the Siri, Jahapana, water management like at Hauj Khas, okay, the royal tank for urban water planning. All those things can be seen here. We have 5 dynasty. Every dynasty has given something. So let us try to see just the highlights of them, right? Let us see just the highlights. So if we see the first dynasty, Mamluk dynasty, it talks about the early Indo-Islamic style, right? Use of temple pillars, which is known as spolia. Examples is Quwaitul Islam Mosque, and one unique example is Qutub Minar. Then Khalji. Khalji, we see the use of broader use of true arches on large scale. Domes were used. Okay, so first true dome is linked to Alai Darwaja that we have seen already. Tughlaq's massive fort, as I've told you, battering effect of the sloping walls, simple designs, utilitarian in nature. Tughlaqabad fort, Ghiyasuddin's tombs can be seen. Sayyid, nothing major new is there, right? Same continuation. Lodis, multiple new things. Garden tombs, na? The concept of garden is going to become very important. Persian influence, octagonal designs are very important. In fact, please remember, double dome was also used for the first time by the Lodis. So we have Lodi garden tombs, okay, Sheesh Gumbad, all of that can be linked. There are certain limitations which we find here, okay, like the double dome, it was not very stable in nature, right? It was not having that beauty is still was to be discovered, and that will be done. That invention will come from the Mughals. Lots of technical inefficiencies were there in the initial structure, like Quwaitul Islam Mosque. Recycled material were used initially, which probably, okay, led to mismatching of the structures. Dome buildings early were small, poorly supported. Mughals built the major domes, right? Even though double dome starts from the Lodis, perfection, the bulbous double domes you'll find only under the Mughals. And Lodi tombs, they paved the way for the garden tombs. All of us know the famous Charbagh style. The Charbagh style, the monument was built in the middle. This Charbagh style was brought in by Babur, but this Charbagh style will be taken to next level by his successors, namely starting from Akbar. Okay, so Mughal architecture is probably the architecture which is the best. Okay, the one of the wonders of the world can be linked to them, so that shows their class. So Humayun's tomb is one of the earliest masterpieces that we have. First major garden tomb, okay, introduced the concept of the best stabilized form of double dome and dome on cube structure, and they have used red sandstone as well as the white marble. If we see Akbar's architecture can be linked first Agra and then Fatehpur Sikri. There is a specific transition. We see a blend of Rajput, Persian, Timurid, everything is there. Like if we see Indian, Buland Darwaja, Gujarati style can be seen. Diwan-e-Khas symbolizes him as the empire's pivot. Fort architecture, we have famous Agra fort, a blend of Hindu as well as the Islamic can be seen. Pillared pavilion like Jahangiri Mahal is there, right? Lahore fort is very prominent. Then Jahangir, one major architecture which stand out is the Itimaduddaulla's tomb. This Itimaduddaulla's tomb becomes the baby Taj. It's also known as the baby Taj. Reason being, this is from where, okay, we find the design which will get converted to the Taj Mahal. It is linked to Noor Jahan. All of you know Noor Jahan became very influential during the later years of Jahangir. First monument among the Mughals in entirely white marble, use of this pietra dura also, which eventually is going to be used on large scale by Shah Jahan. If we see Shah Jahan is responsible for making this Taj Mahal a symbol of love, symbol of symmetry, proportion, grandeur of the highest level, the perfect use, one of the largest dome that we have seen, okay, UNESCO World Heritage Site, and all of you know it's a wonder of the world. Red Fort, again known for its sturdiness, okay. Nahar Bishit, it's a stream of paradise, water channels are there in the palaces. This is something which is we often find linked with the enhancement of the beauty of the monuments by using the water. That's what we find. Jama Masjid, again one of the largest mosque in India with 3 domes, 2 minarets, and it has been made in the red sandstone. The later phase where we see a decline, okay, so Badshahi Mosque, Bibi Ka Maqbara, which is often known as poor man's Taj, less refinement is there, right? And later Mughal, because of instability, we do not find any major innovation in the architecture, right? So that's why we need to remember that. So when we see architecture in general, architecture is something which creates political legitimacy. Architecture is something which also creates a sense of relatability with the public. That's why architecture was used, okay, for multiple purposes. Architecture is also something which links the political class and the religious class. And as a result of this, the legitimacy increases over a period of time. And that's what these people were trying to do. Like Humayun's tomb established dynastic legitimacy. Fatehpur Sikri shows his imperial vision. All those kinds of things can be found. Assimilation like Akbar's tomb, it ensure Islamic as well as the Hindu elements can be seen together. Buland Darwaja merges Islamic with the local ornamentation. So Gujarati influence can be seen in the Buland Darwaja. So this is about the Mughals. I hope if you are looking for certain points with respect to the Mughals, this is more than enough. Just utilize it for the purpose and you'll be able to do pretty well. Then Rajput in architecture. When we see Rajput in architecture, one thing stands out, that is the creation of the forts. Large number of hill forts have been created, like Chittorgarh fort is very prominent. Kumbhalgarh is very unique, okay. So after this Great Wall of China, with respect to India, it's known as Great Wall of India also. This Kumbhalgarh fort has 36-kilometer wall, which is something unique in India. We see large number of defensive elements in these, like walls are there, water tanks, and a large number of step wells, etc. All of this can be seen. Many of these prominent temples have also been built by the Rajputs, okay. Like if we see Dilwara Jain temple, which is linked to them, right? Marble carvings are there. Somnath temple, symbol of resilience, it has been rebuilt multiple times. Ekalingji temple is there, right? Blending Nagara and Madu, Gujarat style. Large number of aesthetic elements can also be seen, right? Aesthetic elements which shows the recognition of beauty. So Amber Palace is one which is known for famous kind of blend of Mughals and Gujarat and the Rajput, with Sheesh Mahal and the painted murals. City Palace, so they feature Jharokhas, Chhatris, etc. Wall paintings can be found which shows large number of Rajput heroes, their court life, and integration of architecture with nature. So Udaipur is something which is beautiful for that, right? So all these architecture, just like the Mughals, it also creates symbolism as well as political ideology. When you make grand architecture, it increases the overall influence that you have over the people. So that grandness creates political legitimacy, and that's we see in the case of them also. So they do look like the defender of the faith, regional pride, all those things can be seen here. So this Rajput architecture showcases honor, faith, beauty, while ensuring the cultural continuity. Islamic influence can also be seen on Rajasthani architecture, because every culture is going to have a certain kind of assimilation. So here also we see certain kind of exchange. Like we see domes and arches are added to the Hindu temples and the palaces like Amber Fort. Geometric patterns, use of geometric and the floral motifs can be seen in the Sheesh Mahal. Amber Fort has fusion of Hindu design with Islamic arches. Jal Mahal combines Persian garden style and the Islamic water features. So those can be seen. Jaipur grid layout, again it is inspired by the geometric planning that we see in the Islam. Water systems which have been used for the broader scenic beauty. So the use of water is an integral element of Mughal architecture. Starting from the Charbagh style, we find that there has been a use of water for the enhancement of beauty. Similarly, use of geometric motifs, right? Because look, in general, in the Islamic architecture, we see the use of the geometric patterns because they do not use paintings for the sake of decoration that much. That's why such kind of things got integrated into the Hindu architecture also. Calligraphy. So Arabic calligraphy, okay, had been utilized even in the Kumbhalgarh fort. So what do we find? We find a certain level of blend of Hindu and the Islamic styles, and this is how it became very, very rich over a period of time. We do find architecture of Deccan Sultanate also. Last year this question was linked to the history optional. Okay, this is where the optional which I teach also to students. So वहाँ ये question आया था. So I was thinking that probably it can come in the GS also. So with the decline of the Bahmani kingdom, we see rise of 5 major states, okay, known as the Deccani states, which includes Bijapur, Golconda, Ahmednagar, the 3 prominent one, the 2 smaller one, the Bidar and the Bidar, and they also have architectural legacy also. So they have large number of Indo-Persian elements like use of arches, bulbous domes, vaulted roofs and high platforms. Ornamentation includes arabesque, calligraphy and even stucco work. So you can remember these keywords, okay. Water systems like tanks, chapels can be seen, and decorative kinds of minarets as well as balustrades, they have been seen in multiple structures. If you see the techniques, materials, use of granite, basalt can be found, stucco and glaze tiles can be seen, and multiple Hindu traditions like brackets, lintels, lotus motifs, all of this can also be established at this point of time. If you see the grandeur, one of the most important is Gol Gumbad, one of the largest dome in the world, okay, that is what it is known for, and plus it is also known as a whispering gallery, which carries sound, okay, very famous for that. Black basalt has been used, okay, in this case, and stucco decoration is also there. Ibrahim Roja, this is the tomb of Ibrahim Adil Shah II, which is known as the prototype of the Taj Mahal, and it combines Persian planning with Deccani aesthetics, okay. Golconda, one of the most famous fort we have, known for its defense system. Concentric fortification is what is linked to Qutub Shahi tombs, okay, that we also find of this dynasty. Charminar is one of the most famous, right? It was built by Muhammad Quli Qutub Shah to mark the foundation of Hyderabad. So Hyderabad eventually became the cultural center of the Deccan, and the functions, the monument, mosque and ceremonial gateway, we see multiple kind of things. Ahmednagar fort is also there, built under Malik Amber, right, who is one of the most famous personality in the Deccan, put resistance against the Mughals also, and it demonstrates the Deccan African synthesis. Bidar fort is again a very prominent one. It's linked to Ahmad Wali Bahmani and Madrasa or Mahmud Gawan. This is also very wonderful, right? This madrasa, again, just like we have the universities like Nalanda, Vikramshila, this madrasa also was going to support education, okay. Teachers came from outside. Mahmud Gawan himself, he was a Persian merchant, so he invited large number of people from that region so that there can be a better development of education in his region, and he was someone who was very efficient, okay. And in this he has used arched facade, calligraphic panels as well as the minarets. All of these things can be seen. Hybrid style local craftsmanship can find its way, like use of lotus motif, elephant carvings, Sultanate domes with Dravidian flourishes. All this is a mixture, a creation of a syncretic culture. Let us see in the end what are the different aspects which we can find in these Deccan sultanates. So please see, if you see the Indo-Islamic elements, we see use of arches, domes and minarets, calligraphy, all this. And what are the example for this? You can write Charminar or the Gol Gumbad. Then local, we find adaptation to local materials, climate. Example could be tomb of Ibrahim Roja. Then syncretism, okay, which we find fusion of the Hindu motifs with Islamic geometric and calligraphic design, Jami Masjid. And finally, political and cultural symbolism. So an architecture which is asserting, okay, Deccani Sultanate autonomy, it can be found in the forts as well as the tombs, okay. All those can be seen, like in the Ahmednagar fort. Vijayanagar, we have discussed a little bit about it already. Let us just see the quick points, okay, so that you can just go for the revision purpose. So they re-envisioned the Dravidian temple architecture, as we have seen, like the famous temples of Virupaksha, Vithal, Rai Gopurams can be seen, okay. Mythical motifs like Yali pillars, Yali Stham, or the Ramayana themes can be seen. They also became the hub, okay, in general. Large number of travelers came to their empire, and they also gave us lots of information. Like, please see, what kind of structures do we find? We find imperial structures like King's Audience Hall, Mahanavami Dibba. They were the platform for royal ceremonies. Lotus Mahal, as I've told you specifically, secular architecture increased during this period. Okay, it's a very striking example of Indo-Islamic fusion. Urban design, the temples, bazaar, है ना? Even the whole city of Vijayanagar was having concentric circles. So that also shows the kind of layout which they were trying to create in order to ensure security, in order to also ensure strategic kind of depth, okay, in their architecture. That can be found. Monumental scale, etc. So we find Rai Gopuram of the Vithal temple. Scale and ornamentation is of certain next level. Defense, 7 concentric fort walls of the city is something new, right? We have this Hazarama Rama famous temple, which is located near the royal enclosure. Again, something new is there, right? And if you see religious syncretism, that is wonderful. Like they were followers of Vaishnavism, right? Some of them were also followers of Shaivism. But at the same time, we find large number of different kinds of religion being followed. Like we find there was a specific mosque in the city of Vijayanagar, which shows even Islamic kind of ideas were also followed, and Islamic architecture can be seen in secular buildings. Hazara Ramba temple, right? We find the carvings which narrate the episode from Ramayana as a divine hero. Musicians, dancers, wrestlers, traders, all of them. These kinds of activities can be seen, which shows a living civilization, which shows a certain level of dynamism in the culture in this civilization. Palatial and secular architecture can be seen. So if you see overall Vijayanagar, so Vijayanagar, it's a perfect combination of cultural assertion as well as urban innovation. So this is broadly the architecture which you can think is important from the medieval era. Modern architecture, just for the sake of completion, in general UPSC does not delve into it, so we can just remember few examples and few specific ideas, and that's it. Okay, so if we see colonial architecture, okay, the British colonial architecture broadly starts from 18th century after the famous battles of Plassey, Battle of Buxar, and with the period of time we see the development of the new kinds of ideas. So first thing which we find is symbolism. They created this Viceregal Lodge, Rashtrapati Bhavan, which represents British authority with classical columns and domes. We also see cultural accommodation, okay, Indian elements like jalis, chatras. So we see this Indo-Saracenic style developing, which was legitimizing the rule also. New classical style can also be seen, use of symmetry, colonnades, domes, etc. You find this writers building in Kolkata, the governor's house also, St. George Church also, all of them. Plus a little bit of blend is there, like Mughal, Rajput, Deccan, everything can be found with Gothic as well as the Victorian elements. Like we have this Victoria Memorial, okay. Then the Madras High Court, Gateway of India, all of this. Many utility buildings are also there, like multiple universities were built by them. Senate House in Chennai, Connaught Place, which all of you know in Delhi, having a grand kind of a structure. Political and cultural objectives, like they were trying to show their imperial power and identity, which is something which we see here, right? Now we have seen the new parliament building. This new parliament building is having a mix of a tradition as well as modernity. So such kind of a question we are expecting can come in 10 marker, or at least for the sake of common knowledge you should know about it. So let us see what are the traditional elements which are there, what are the modern features. So if you see the design, okay, so here we find triangular layout symbolizing the Shri Yantra, right? On the other hand, if you see the modern feature 2047, which is ready designed for digital governance. Symbolism like banyan tree, it reflects Gurukul Parampara. Smart features like digital voting, paperless. Gateways like 6 mythological gates like famous Gajdwar. On the other hand, we have disaster resilience, biometric security. Interiors like peacock in the Lok Sabha, lotus in the Rajya Sabha, which shows the traditional elements. Okay, and here we found advanced acoustics, earthquake resistance, art and aesthetics. 5,000 plus artwork are there. PWD friendly is there, and sustainability. Use of traditional materials is there. On the other hand, we find features which are required for today's sustainable development, like solar power, rainwater harvesting, and even zero waste. All those elements are also there. And finally, material sourcing, we find use of sandstone, teak, bamboo from different state, which shows national integration. Here we find locally sourced materials which show self-reliance, even the eco-conscious construction. This is just like an extra, okay? There's an extra towards the end. Now please see this whole video which is dealing with art and architecture. This is broadly seen from the perspective that how you prepare for it when you're preparing for the mains specifically, right? But some of this can also help you in the prelims, because some questions which in the form of facts can also be dealt with this. So please keep on watching, okay? Ensure that whatever you watch, you get the maximum out of it. These kinds of series which are coming on this PW YouTube channel, they're very useful. They're going to be very useful for you. And if you can watch it, okay, please make notes side by side. This is my humble request, because as a person who has cleared this exam twice, when you make your own notes, the recallability is very high. And when certain kinds of advices are given in the minor topics, please take them. Small things here and there, they differentiate you from the others, and toppers are built like this. And I would like all of you to use this information and become toppers yourself. Okay, thank you so much. Signing off, but I would like to see you again in some other forms, some other videos which are going to be very useful for the UPSC preparation. Till that time, keep on preparing, keep on watching, and utilize this information for the best of the knowledge as well as for the best of the marks. Thank you so much.